and then you're like, oh, we got to go back to that place, and you're that. We just kind of start craving it because you look square in the eyes at everything that's going on. There's not a denial of anything bad. There's just always a higher truth. And you look at things from such a, most people flying at like 10 feet above the ground and they're smashing into trees and stuff. You're like 50,000 feet. And you're like, oh, wow, look what God was doing there. Look what God's doing now. Look what God says he's going to do in the future. You have a perspective that's just so necessary right now.
Well, I appreciate, that you guys understand what we do and what I do. The whole point to understanding is God has got this. Okay. And so everything that's going on in the world is by his design. So they're not in charge. Everything you're seeing on TV, everything that they're broadcasting, that's happening, right? God knew they were going to do it, right? And so I look at from a cycle perspective, right? Ecclesiastes, that which has been will be again. And that is so important to understand. If you do not study history, you will never know what's going to happen tomorrow or in the future. Okay. That's the bottom line. It is so important to understand, the market analysis, we can use time patterns or time windows of time using the charts to predict what the markets will do in advance. Because very simply, life replays itself, sometimes perfectly, sometimes very, very similarly. But the point is, life repeats. Then, and so what's happening in our world right now? Well, you have to study history. So let's go back to study what happened to Pharaoh and Israel. Well, we know that Israel was in bondage for 400 years. Then Moses shows up and then takes them out of captivity and brings them to freedom, brings them on the other side of the Red Sea. Okay, Moses didn't do it, but God did it. But but Moses was the vessel. You understand? So Israel had a covenant. It's all about covenants. Okay, Israel had a covenant with God. In other words, God chose Israel. There's a covenant there. United States chose God. There's a covenant there. So it's been 400 years since the Mayflower landed. Israel was in bondage to Pharaoh for 400 years.
Wow.
So that which has been will be again. The only difference this time is that happened at the Red Sea. This will be a worldwide Red Sea. Okay, so it's going to be a worldwide event because then, that was the world, the center of the world, Egypt. Right. Okay, now the center of the world is the world. Okay, and so that, when we got Mystery Babylon running the world right now, and so that's why this is not going to be a localized event. Even though, compared to what it was at the time of Pharaoh and Israel, it's going to be worldwide. And we're this close to events going down. And we're going to go through some very critical time windows here, but it's all heading into, what I would call, if you Google the words, Mayday, 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 like when you're going to go down, right? When you're going to go down in an airplane or ship's going down, what do? You call Mayday, 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 Mayday. Incredibly, you're going to find through this presentation, the calculations are all pointing to the first week of May being very incredible time point for utter, so in other words, the best word I can use for utter destruction, meaning like the worst time the world has ever seen. Like it's going to be one of the worst times the world has ever seen in the best times the world has ever seen.
I love it. Before we started recording, you actually said May will be horrific and historic. And I thought, wow.
But it does have to be global because we're in a global setting. They weren't in a global setting in the days of Pharaoh and Moses. They've been it was the globe as far as the world as far as they knew it. But we had a show yesterday and there was some stuff about Ukraine. We're talking about Kiev and well, instantly our producer's pulling up the weather. What was the weather that day? It was in February. I can tell you what the temperature and how much cloud cover there was in a certain city on February the 20th. Everything that happens. You're buying something from here and they're running short on the supply or supply chains. If God moves, it has to affect the whole world because we're all affected by each other in a way that's never been before.
Well, the other example to that, right? What happens when you got to read Revelation? What does it say? It says when the Lamb of Judah opens the first seal, the world will never be the same. It's written, right? And so when Corona hit the world's never been the same. Okay, so the seals began to open. Now, this is really important too, because if God's going to do something, he's going to do it on his time, not on our time.
Right.
Okay. So could God do it tomorrow? Maybe, but I doubt it. Right. And the reason why tomorrow, say March 15th, the reason why not tomorrow, because tomorrow's not a feast day. Okay. What I've noticed is that, God wrote the end from the beginning. We know that with Daniel 2 prophecy, 2,500 year prophecy that stands. Okay. Every part of it's come to happen so far, except Daniel 2 verse 34. But the point is everything when you study in the Bible, when God's he's moved in his feasts. So like Corona, right? It happened. The first diagnosed case, everything that happened with Corona literally happened on Hanukkah at the end of 2019, the last day the first came out, right? So then as the first couple days of January started 2020, we were literally in the beginning of the end, not the end times. Okay. The beginning of the end times. Okay. What is that? Well, it's actually kind of interesting because the beginning of the end times is the time of sorrows, right? So Matthew 24, there'll be wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not deceived because the end is not yet. Okay. And so what we're seeing is these people, they've been structuring and strategizing for generations. They've been on here for, Satan's been on the earth for thousands of years. So he's been planning this for a long time. But basically what they're trying to usher in is a new world, one world government. Okay. A new world order, one world government.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're trying to come in and they've got trillions of dollars that they've created out of thin air. They've enslaved humanity and they control humanity just like Pharaoh did. Okay. They dug in their heels, no different than Pharaoh. They refused to turn from their wicked ways, no different than Pharaoh. Okay. So it's the same thing that happened with Pharaoh, no different. Okay. And Israel would have been destroyed until God showed up and flipped the tables on these people, right? But now the interesting part of when did God do it to Pharaoh, right? Well, he did it at Passover, right? And so we're stepping into Passover, like in, I don't even, but 3 weeks from now, okay? So it's incredible where we're heading into timelines here. Look what's happening. You want another example? I'll give you a couple more examples of how God moves on certain time points, okay? Do you realize that the Tucker Carlson stuff that just came out, that about J6?
Yeah.
Everything that came out, if your staff could just, if your son could be so kind and just click on page 9, check it out. Okay. Do you realize that Purim was March 6th and 7th? When did the Tucker Carlson stuff come out about January 6th?
Was it March 6th and 7th?
Exactly.
Wow.
Okay. It came out on Purim. I'm not making this up. The link is there. You can click it. The first video literally came out on Purim where these people, the truth of what they did literally got exposed on John. They for 2 years they've been pushing a narrative that literally blew up in their face on Purim. Okay.
All the slides that let's make an announcement real quick. If you're listening on Apple, the radio stations, or someplace where you cannot see the screen, you can send us a text and get the slides we're referencing. Send us a text to 40509, the word bow. 40509, the word bow, and then there are some screenshots with QR codes you can get on some of the slides. But if you can't see the screen, that won't help you. So text 40509, the word bow, and you can have these. This is the kind of content, though, you do want to probably get those.
Yeah.
You can even do it as like a home study. I had a conversation with Bo about a week or so ago too, and Stacey said, "What all did you have to say?" And I'm like,
because I always get so excited anytime that we talk to Bo. I mean, we always leave so encouraged but also informed.
I'm like, it was a drink of water from a fire hose. I needed notes, and then you got to go back and study because for him, he's in this stuff hours a day, and it's like sharing his phone number. And so there's so many dates and times and connections
and links
and links and the receipts to back it up. But he kind of comes at it like part engineer, part mad scientist, and so you need the slides of what he's saying to back it up because it all ties together.
And the point is, all of it is by God's design. I am doing nothing but showing what God has planned 2,000 years ago. And I'm just putting pieces together for the world to see how incredible, how amazing our God is. Everything that's happening is by his design. And it's just the timing of these things is freakishly awesome, how it's perfectly playing out. And as we talk, you're going to see really what I'm talking about, how this is all literally coming together beautifully. But, when we want it to happen in our time, but God's doing it in his perfect timing. See, there's a difference. He's doing it in his perfect timing. And we're seeing why, because if we didn't have these 2 years, we would have never have known how sick these people are, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And then the past 2 years, they've all dug in their heels. They've also exposed themselves because you cannot prosecute pre-crime. So if you're thinking of doing something, you can't prosecute somebody, but once they've done the act, then you can prosecute. You get it? So these 2 years had to happen. So then you could then prosecute. Wow. And that's coming. So that's coming, but you have to have the crime happen first. And then you have to, of all the players, expose what side they're on, right? So all of it's now happened. They've all, like Pharaoh, dug in their heels. Everyone's picked a side. And now,
that's so true.
Yep. And now we're just waiting for the exposure of how this plays out, right? And so why is this so important now? Because we're heading into some feasts. If Colton click on page 17, so we know Corona happened, like we're talking about. Corona literally came out on Hanukkah, okay? So this is when it started. And that was God's time, Hanukkah. Okay. Then you go to the next couple slides. So you head over to page 19, right? And page 19 talks about May 31. This was Pentecost. Actually, this was the day that I got baptized, officially in water, right? And so I happened to get baptized. And the first day I spoke in tongues. I don't think I've done it really that well since then. My mind says I got to keep practicing, but I got to do that. But the point being is the second seal manifested on Pentecost. That's when the George Floyd riots broke out.
Wow.
Okay. So I'm trying to illustrate why feasts are so important to God, because they're his appointed times. So the next slide takes us over to page 20. We're stepping into the greatest financial event in human history. You have Dr. Kirk Elliott on your show. You do an incredible job of trying to get people to be aware of owning God's money. Haggai 2 verse 8, the silver and the gold are mine, saith the Lord. If God's going to do something, he's he's going to do it on his feast, because he has historically. And we're going to talk about some of the things that have happened on Passover. The point is, is it this Passover, another Passover? See, that's the point, that's God's secret, right? So we don't know which Passover, but I would say the probability, after what we're going to talk about, the probability is like screaming that it's this Passover, that things are about to literally just go insane across the world. We've got Ken Christmas, as the year started, said the angel of death is now on the earth.
He did.
The angel of death is on the earth, and that was a fact. There's a link with there if you want to listen to it. But the point is that was stated, which means that the angel of death is now waiting for God's instruction on what day he's supposed to strike. The point about the angel of death is when he struck Pharaoh on Passover. Okay, this is important. On Passover, okay, he struck it was the firstborn of each family of Egypt, right? So the event was mind-blowing, because it was an act of God, because how could each firstborn of each family have died unless it was by design? Get it? It wasn't just random deaths, it was specific deaths. That's what makes it biblical, because you can't, it's an impossibility for that to happen, but our God is the master of making the impossible possible.
But Bo, can I ask you a question? You were talking about dates and how these significant things that happen, Hanukkah and coronavirus and the George Floyd and all of that. So let me ask you a question. I don't believe that God causes these bad things, but they are on these dates. So how does that line up, with a calendar? I don't think he caused the coronavirus, but it ended up on Hanukkah. How does that happen?
Well, you have to just go through time. So God wrote the end from the beginning. He knew that evil's on the earth. We're waiting for a royal, but you got to, like he said at the beginning, you got to step back and look at the big picture, 50,000 feet up, got to look down, right? So God's coming back for a royal wedding. So we know that's about to happen. Okay, at some point in the future, God's coming back for a wedding. And in order for the wedding to happen, you have to have the parts of Revelation play out, right? And so if you read Revelation, there's a whole bunch of horrible things in there where it says, 100-pound hailstorms, a third of the mountains disappear, a third of the water disappears, a third of the fish disappear. Like, there's really a lot of horrific things in there, right? And so all these things have to happen, and evil has a plan. They're trying to come in early. The best answer I can give you is, I think, evil's trying to come in early because they have the trillions of dollars right now. See, it's all about the money. How they built everything, how they did everything, Stacey and David, was with the money, right? They detached it with Nixon off of the dollar, off of gold in 1971. And so for 50 plus years now, they've basically been creating money out of thin air, and they've enslaved humanity. So all this money has allowed them this incredible power. And so now they're trying to step forward, coming in early.
I've heard Robin say that before too. I've heard him talk about how they are trying to push it the end times before it's time.
Right. And so a part of their agenda, so the seal 1 has always been, it wasn't like, it's always been, we didn't know that, but it's always been, the first seal has always been the fact that what was supposed to happen was Corona. That was the first seal of Revelation. We didn't know that, right? We didn't know what Revelation was thousands of years ago. We didn't know what Revelation really understood even 100 years ago, because it's the reveal, right? It gets revealed because it doesn't make a lot of sense hundreds of years ago, but now everything's kind of coming, the pieces are coming together, and we're starting to see it all happen. So Corona was always a part of it. God always knew that, when they're going to try to push their agenda, they're going to open the first seal, God's going to allow them to open the first seal. And that started the beginning of the end, right? And so that's the best way I can describe it to you. It was always in the plan. It was always in God's plan. And they're doing nothing. Probably the better answer would be, they're doing nothing but working within God's timeline. They don't even realize it.
Interesting.
Like, they don't even realize that what they're doing is in God's timeline, and they just happened to open the first seal, and God allowed it to happen when, on his feast. How crazy is this? But it did, right? And then how did on Pentecost, right? So that's when the Holy Spirit comes down upon the earth and showers the earth with a spirit, right? Well, that causes a freak out session, because evil hates the Holy Spirit, evil hates God, right? And so they freaked out, and you just happened that time how the George Floyd riots break out on Pentecost. So I don't know how that works. All I'm just pointing out that it works, right? It's happening in the specific timeline. Why did it happen at the Red Sea, Passover, or at Passover and Pharaoh? I don't know. You see what I'm saying? But it's God's earth, it's God's plan, and everything that happens in it is within God's plan.
But I think that's the lens that you look through. And for for those of you, first time ever hearing Bo, I don't know the best way to frame it, but just to say Bo has done really well in investing, markets, understanding currencies, understanding, these trends and timings. And in order to do that, you cannot look at charts, graphs, things happening in a market and want it to go a certain way. You have to make investments based on what is, not what you want. It's not like watching a football game and you're hoping your team wins and then you place a bet because you like that team. When you're making money in the markets, you have to look at trends and reality, be unattached, and make moves based on what is. And so I think you're prepared for this in a very unique way, because you can look at these things in a very objective way and say, these are just the times that things happen. And then you look and say, what is going on that aligns with these times? But you're not trying to manipulate them and jam them and shoehorn them into your agenda. You just look at what is, the same as a trader would look at charts and graphs and candles and wicks.
Point.
Exactly right. When I write my currency reports, right, on cryptocurrencies, for example, or gold and silver, right, all I write is the pattern that's fulfilling itself. Like I wrote last year, expect boring in Bitcoin to the end of the year, and then in January it's going to start to jump vertical. It's exactly what happened. So for basically 3 months we sat and just watched. And also in October I wrote that about this thing, the 7th or the 8th of November, there's going to be a crash in Bitcoin. I want Bitcoin to go up because, hey, I want gold and silver to go up because we're all waiting for the wealth transfer, right? But I can only write what I see, right? And so it happens specifically, so the FTX crash, for example, right? We knew that Bitcoin is going to crash in October, and then it crashed exactly on November 7th and 8th. And then we found out that it was because of the FTX scandal, but I didn't know any of that. All I knew was that there's going to be a drop in the price, and then it's going to go sideways, and it's going to jump up into the end of January. It's exactly what it did. And then it's going to go sideways in February. It's exactly what it did. David and I were talking, in terms of precious metals, we enter the end of February, Bitcoin and gold and silver are supposed to go down. Exactly what happened. And then now Bitcoin, gold and silver are starting to jump vertical. Why? Look what's happening in the financial world. Well, why? Because we said in March, it's going to start getting exciting. That's exactly what's happening, right? So all you can do is just watch the cycles and the patterns. So I look at the charts to understand when things are going to or could happen, and then I look at the biblical timelines, and it freaks me out because when I line up the biblical timing and then I compare it with the actual chart patterns that that are illustrated, that for some reason I have this ability to look at chart patterns in no other way, like different than anybody else does, and I can foretell what's going to happen. And when I look at the patterns and I compare it with the Bible, it blows me away, because basically all I'm seeing is that precious metals, cryptocurrencies are about to go insane. And I mean, like, insanely exciting for those who have positioned themselves, like yourself, for what's about to happen, right? And so, and then because the chart patterns are indicating that we're about to start getting some aggressive price movements, to the upside. Well, and then you look at what's going on in the world, and then we look at the Bible, right? So if you can pull out page 26, right? What is page 26?
Exciting now. Between now and July, you guys buckle up. We were talking before we started recording today. You're gonna get your pins ready, and also get these charts 40509, the word bow. You want to. This is not a time to be asleep at the wheel. Between now and July, there is a lot of dates you want to be aware of.
Well, the next 4 months will be, I can describe it as this: the 4 months the world will never forget.
Wow.
Come on.
Okay. So you've got March, half of it left. So you got April, May, and June. So the next 3.5 months are going to be a time point the world will never forget. It's going to be absolutely insane based on what I'm seeing. So it'll be the worst the world has ever seen. One of the worst time points the world's ever seen, because the way we transact the financial system, everything we know blows up, like literally collapses. And that leads to the collapse of everything, because the money they've used has allowed them to build everything that they want to build, right? So the control of everything, the political system, the news media, it's all controlled. And so when the dollar collapses and loses the status of the world reserve currency, then their game is up. Their gig is up. But it's going to be a very difficult time point, because we're not going to be able to transact. It's going to be very, very hard for a period of time, and people are going to lose millions, billions, and some trillions. Okay, they're going to lose. This is going to be historic. But on the other side of it, it's in the best the world has ever seen, because the bride has been preparing for this and knows this is coming. So when you look at Passover, I think I've mentioned this before, but we know this is the actual day the Passover lamb died. This is when they resurrect. This is when they crucified Jesus Christ on Passover. Okay. So my question back to you, Stacey, is why did it happen on Passover? You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Why did they do that on God's appointed time? But they did. Yeah. How crazy. You see, so whenever the evil.
And even Jesus knew it. Like he would say in certain situations, this is not the time. Like he knew, he felt the time, and he knew the time.
When they were going to throw him off the cliff after we read Isaiah 61, he goes, not today. And he walked
not today. And he walked right through him.
Not today.
Not today. I mean, he knew.
Yes, because that wasn't a feast, right? It wasn't the feast. It was so it's crazy, but evil, God's evil is acting in God's time. Wow. It's insane how this is playing out. And then why did Isaac trick Jacob to Isaac was tricked to bless Jacob on Passover? Why did he do it on that day? Okay, why did Gideon's 300? Why were they assembled on that date? The angel of death killed 185 Assyrian soldiers on that day. Why? Okay. Why did Haman, this is a better one, why did Haman go to the king and try to convince him to kill all the Jews on Passover? Why? Why are they acting on God's feast? But they are. But they are, right? So that's the best answer I can give you to your question.
Really good.
This was why was Daniel thrown in the lion's den on Passover?
Wow.
Why did Belshazzar drink from the vessels? Why did Belshazzar drink from the vessels and desecrate the vessels that were from the temple on Passover? And then he died that night. Mene, tekel, upharsim. Your kingdom, you've been weighing the balances and found wanting. Your kingdom has come to an end. Why is the world upside down in terms of finances? I did the math the other day. Very simple. Okay, $1 trillion. You're gonna like this. $1 trillion is a 1 with 12 zeros. Okay, and then you take the U.S. population. So you divide $1 trillion. $1 trillion divided by the U.S. population. So that basically equates about roughly $3,000. So for every every trillion they create out of thin air, they should give every single person in the United States $3,000.
Wow.
But they don't. They use it for themselves, right? So on the stock market crash of 2020, they created $7 trillion over the weekend. So therefore, every single citizen of the United States should have received $20,000, $21,000, but they didn't. They took it for themselves. You see, so that's called you've been weighing the balances and found wanting. So what's happening is they keep creating money out of thin air. They take it to themselves. They stick it to the stock market. They basically keep pumping up their own stuff. So you have a separation of the elite versus the population. And so you've got this massive separation right now. And when Nixon took us off the gold standard, that allowed them to create the trillion. So now they've created who knows how many trillions, maybe 20 trillion, 100 trillion, 500, who knows how many trillions they've created, right? Just a budget was 3 trillion, right? So the point is, when they create the money out of thin air, they're making the population poorer and poorer and poorer, less wealthy. And so you have a separation from the elite, from the populace, right? And that's what's going on in the world. So it's just a simple math calculation. And so now, why was it written? You've been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Your kingdom is found wanting. You've destroyed the finances of the population. God gave us honest money. The elite came in, detached it from gold, had created a dishonest money system. And now what happened to Belshazzar is about to happen to the kings of the earth. Okay, the modern day pharaohs, because they've been weighed by God in the balances and found wanting. Their kingdom is about to come to an end and will be given to, not this time the Medes and the Persians, but will be given to the church, the bride. Okay, so Proverbs 13:22, the wealth of the sinner is stored up for the righteous. Okay, you understand that hasn't happened yet. If you read Deuteronomy, what does Deuteronomy state? It's very clear. We're to be the lenders to the nations. Okay, well, that hasn't happened yet either. Get it? So none of these things that have been prophesied have happened yet. How awesome is our God and what he's about to do to these people? Because
and we're alive.
Right. So they've used the money system to no different than ever has happened in history. They use all this money, and it's about enslavement. If you can click on page 42. Colton, please. This is Ecclesiastes 2, verse 26. You're going to love this one, okay? So there's other people out there who literally don't have the finances to buy gold and silver, okay? And I understand that, okay? Because most of the people, the world have been, look what happened to the financial system. Most people are just over broke. They got a job, they're just over broke, barely paying their bills. Many are living on the streets, so they don't have the finances. So this is a word of hope from God to the world. Ecclesiastes 2, verse 26. To the person who pleases God, he gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. Okay, that is what you and I, that's what we're doing. Okay, we're giving wisdom, knowledge, happiness. But to the sinner, he gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth. So what are the Bill Gates, Soros, they're all the trillionaires, right? Yep. What have they been doing? They've been gathering and storing up wealth. Let's read the last line. To hand over to the ones who please God.
Come on.
Wow, that is very encouraging.
So, so how does that play out? That's called the greatest wealth transfer in human history. What did Israel do to Egypt? They plundered Egypt. Yep. There's Ecclesiastes 2, verse 26. That is what has been, will be again. There is nothing new under the sun, Ecclesiastes. So I'm trying to have the viewers understand how awesome this time of life is, okay? And there's other people, it's really fun to touch on. There's other people that are just, all over the internet constantly saying, we're going to be raptured out or get me out of here, God, right? You understand? Right now, the bride is beat up, okay? Like, they basically, the whole world, doesn't have means. Do you think God, he's like, this is his playground, like, this is God, earth is God's footstool. I'm just going to say this. Earth is God's footstool. He's in charge. He's not going to come take his bride out of here who's been beat up right now, who, conquered. Are you kidding? When the rapture happens, it's for a bride that's victorious, that he's proud of, right? That this is God's bride. When you married your wife, you were proud of your wife. You lathered her with gifts, everything she needed, okay? That's our God. He's going to take care of his bride, give her everything he needs, victorious. And right before he comes into the last, very end of it, where he's going to destroy these people and just all the things that are written in Revelation about, half the hailstorms, everything coming down. Yeah, then we'll get raptured out of here as the victorious bride. As the victorious bride. proud for coming and then come back down for the royal wedding. Matthew, you know, what's written in the prayer, right? Our Father who art in heaven, holy be your name, your kingdom come.
Your will be done.
So
yep.
yeah, so the kingdom's coming to earth. So the point is that all these horrible things that are happening on the earth are because evil is in control right now. And so if we can click on page 30, I'll show you this and to give you a visual understanding of how awesome our God is with regards to time and seasons.
Okay.
So if you look, Corona itself came out, and the first diagnosed case was on January 12th, where it was a pandemic, whereas the first diagnosed case outside of China. It's in a prior slide. So January 12th of 2020. Well, if you look at the very bottom there, you'll see there's a Daniel cycle of time. It's 1,260 days. Then there's a 30-day window and another 1,260 days. So 1,260 days takes us precisely to this June 25, 2023. So and then 3 days before that is a summer solstice, June 21. What does light do to darkness? That's why every day more truths are coming out, because light is exposing the deals done in the dark.
Yeah.
So by the summer solstice, okay, so which is the 21, the calculation comes into June 25. Everything's done, finished. The truths have come out. Everything's exposed. Everything that all the horrific things that they've done is exposed. The game is up. And the first 3.5 years, so it was 3.5 years from the time Corona came out. So first seal, 3.5 years takes us to this summer. And then that leads us into what Kim Clement said, this, the summer will be the mediator between spring and fall, so that the fall can do its work in America. And what does that mean? It means that all the truths come out. Then the new era that we've been waiting for would start after June 25, say in the summertime, July. So July 4th is going to be probably one of the greatest July 4ths the world's ever seen.
Yes.
Because all the truths are out. Everything's come out. And so now we're stepping into the new era. Now, interestingly enough, if you look at time and the birth of a child, so it's 9 months. So on page 4, what kind of blows me away is the calculation from when the first pandemic, when it was first diagnosed of January 12th, you go 1,260 days, it lands precisely on June 25. But then the confirmation on this is birth, right? We're waiting for a birth of a new era. Literally means the fall of Babylon and a birth. See, God's kingdom cannot exist in Babylon. It's really important to understand that. God's kingdom, God's not coming back to Babylon. He's coming to his kingdom that he's going to lay upon the earth. Right now, we are nothing but screaming in the wilderness, prepare the way for the Lord. So we're preparing the way. If January 1 would be our new year, God's new year is September 25, because that's Rosh Hashanah. Okay. 9 months to the exact day, just happens to be June 25, the exact same day.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm telling you, something huge is coming. If we go to Passover, we talked about what happened at Passover. Now, page 28, this is the important part, because Passover is the time when Pharaoh let Israel go. They left Egypt. Israel left Egypt with all the gold and silver. How awesome is that, right? So
I know, yeah, they plundered it.
They plundered it, right? And so there's your Proverbs 13:22. There's your Ecclesiastes, right? So the wealth transfer that we've been waiting for, that you've been talking about, with Kirk Elliott. Okay, I'm telling you, do expect that we're going to see that manifest in April.
Wow.
And we're starting to see this now with the banks blowing up. Okay, the banks are starting to blow up right here.
We just saw this in front.
It is.
Okay,
glad to be alive right now.
Yeah.
So they're doing this to try to get rid of all the banks so they can centralize it with only their big banks, right? And so they're blowing up all the small banks. Remember, because evil's still in charge right now. They're blowing up the mid-sized banks so they can consolidate into like maybe 4 banks or some of the top banks, right? And so they're trying to centralize their power into a one world government, right? And then God intervenes.
So what we're seeing is still the evil with that.
Yes.
They're just destroying the banks so that they could have. Okay. So it's okay.
So as good as it might appear right now, it's starting a bull market in gold and silver. But the point is, right, they're still in control. They're always going to be in control until Isaiah 61 is fulfilled, the last line. Okay. And why I mean by that, because there's 2 biblical things we need to understand. The return of Christ is the glory, the glory, the glory. That's what we've been waiting for 2,000 years. Okay. But there's another glory event which happened at the Red Sea. Okay. That wasn't Jesus Christ coming to earth. Okay. That was God the Father. It was the Trinity. But basically, the Trinity manifested through Moses, and they parted the Red Sea and they closed it on Pharaoh. And that was a glory event. Okay. And so the point is, we're stepping into a glory event that's about to happen on this earth. And it'll be a completion of Isaiah 61, the year of the Lord's favor, which is the Jubilee. It's 50 years. Leviticus, thou shalt consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land and to all of its inhabitants. This is 50 years from Klaus Schwab founding the World Economic Forum. It's 50 years from abortion. from Roe v. Wade being overturned. Okay, it's 50 years from Klaus Schwab, World Economic Forum, 50 years from Nixon takes off the gold standard.
Yep,
okay,
gold standard.
so that's all 50 years. So we're at 50 years right now of all these things happening, and then specifically with abortion, this is the essence of it, right? Abortion. It was January 22nd, 1973, when it became law.
Yep.
So this past January is officially that we are in right now year 50 based on abortion. And if we look at it based on God's cycle of time, September 25, add 9 months, that takes us into June 25. So this year, anytime into this coming September, is literally the 50-year Jubilee where God will intervene and complete Isaiah 61 and the day of vengeance of our God. And then that leads us into 3.5 years of glory on this earth like you've never seen before. We're talking financial blessings like you haven't never imagined. But the financial blessing will be so huge, you're not going to know what to do with all the money. So you're not going to be focusing on money. You're going to be focusing on spiritual revival. We're going to have revivals like we've never seen before. This May 30th, or is it May 28th, is basically Pentecost. Okay, so the latter rain that was birthed, I didn't say, but basically when the second seal opened, the latter rain was birthed. 10 days before that, the Edenville Dam broke in the township of Hope, Michigan, and the latter rain that's going to marry the bride was birthed. The spiritual side of it was birthed on earth. So this Pentecost, the latter rain, is now 3 years old. 3-year-old children can walk, can talk. Okay, they have the ability to do things. So that's why we're about to see the revival, because the latter rain is now 3 years old. And so now we're going to see awesome things start to happen on this earth from a spiritual revival standpoint, because the latter rain is now 3 years old. So we're heading into a wedding. And so it's incredible how God put this all together. But the point is, it took 18 days from Passover for Israel to get to the Red Sea. They camped there for 8 more days. And then it was on the 25th day they crossed. And that was a day that Pharaoh and his army were destroyed. So whatever awesome things happen or crazy things happen in April, understand Pharaoh had buyer's remorse and he came after Israel to kill him. Okay. And remember, so this is a fight to the death. These are alpha predators. Okay. These people are demon possessed alpha predators. They will not stop. So we're going into a battle of our lifetime, meaning, but who cares, because God's got this, right? But they're going to throw probably the nuclear card. They're going to scare the world. We're about to go nuclear war or something. They got Skull and Bones coming next week, which is 322. That's their Skull and Bones number. So don't be surprised if something crazy, that's their number, not God's number, right? So the Nazi Germany concentration camps opened on 322. 90 years ago to the exact date, this March 22nd. So we've got a 90-year cycle, a 400-year cycle for Pharaoh. We've got a 50-year cycle for Leviticus. So everything's pointing to something big's about to blow right here. And, are you prepared? Do you have extra food? Do you have extra water? Because the food chain is going to get messed up, because the credit card system is going to go down. So people are not going to be able to buy things and pay for things. And so the distributors for the food are not going to be able to get paid. So everything's going to go black, like what happened to Lazarus. Lazarus was dead in the tomb. And then the glory showed up, right? Lazarus, rise. Why did God wait 4 days? Why? So the world might see his glory. So God's going to get the glory on all of what's about to happen. Okay.
And when do you think that darkness will be? Bo, is God giving you kind of something on that?
No, see, that's the thing. We don't know the darkness, but I would say that the darkness would be possibly in the first week of May. And the reason I'm saying that is because that was in the 25th day from the 6th of April would be the great exodus time point, which was literally would be the time point when everything that Pharaoh was dead. He was finished. So the game is over. So something huge happens potentially as April is ending, and specifically as first week of May. And so everything we know goes dark, goes scary, something crazy happens, and then because God only needs a day, but that's what happened. That was the day so does it happen on May 1? No one knows, because it's God's time. But I'm telling you, Passover is critical. The calculations point to May 1. So somewhere as May starts, something crazy happens financially in the world, that literally makes it look horrible, but at the same time awesome, right? Because when Israel was crossing the Red Sea, they were a little scared. I'm sure they're very scared, but they got to the Red Sea, no problem. And the Red Sea closed. So it was just, what side of the fence were you sitting on when all this went down, right? And that's why you can't fear, because it's going to get ugly and scary, because these are alpha predators that will not stop. They know that if the truth comes out of what they did, they're dead. So they're going to fight to the death.
Well,
if the truth comes out of what they did, they're dead. They know they're dead. Okay. Because that's why the Haman thing, they're going to hang on the gallows, no different than Haman. Okay. Trump just recently said something about hangings. Okay. But that they should be tried for treason and hung. Okay. Trump actually foretold what he's going to do, because that happened to Haman. And we got 3 blood moons coming up on the next 3 Passovers. So the hangings that we're going to see on national TV are going to be next year.
Can't make this stuff up.
Yeah. So we're going to see
even the stars are in alignment.
I know. What were you going to say?
Well, it's like a nervous reaction. Like if you drive over a snake with your car, they're still going to be, coming back. It's like Pharaoh received a death blow, but he could not stop himself from pursuing into the sea. And in Egypt went in one day from being the greatest world power ever at that moment to being a really cool tourist destination.
Yeah.
They never were a threat again.
Right. And that's going to be the equivalent of China. So the modern day pharaohs came out of China. Okay. So it's a worldwide system, but basically, if you had to give it a country, it would be China is going to experience what happened to Egypt. Okay. So they will never be a worldwide power ever again for what the blow that's coming to them.
Wow.
And that was foretold because if you see now in the prophetic and time windows. Okay. So we know, so Ruth Bader Ginsburg died on Rosh Hashanah. And I basically said within 2 years of her death, Roe v. Wade will be overturned. It just happened to be that Roe v. Wade was overturned on 21 months, 6 days, which is 3 times 7. And then Roe v. Wade was overturned at 21 months, 6 days precisely. And on the 7th day, he rested. Okay. So now it's interesting what happened. So the next Rosh Hashanah was September of 2021. And on that day, that we have the massive debacle of the Evergrande bonds. Okay. Which means that within 21 months, China's finished. 6 days, so which would potentially be June. So that would correlate directly with the time window that we've got of June 25. So China's finished by the end of June.
I mean, there are big things coming up.
And then one more calculation for you. So when the Saudi Arabia signed a contract with Russia, remember that one for the petrodollar, right? Because we have a contract with them. That contract was signed, or the military agreement was signed, yes, on August 24th. Of 2021. So 21 months, 6 days is this May 30th. So by May 30th of this year, the financial system that we know is blown up. Okay. Finished, complete, done. So the financial system is blown up. Gold and silver are on a massive rampage to the upside with cryptocurrencies because the dollar system we know has blown up. We're going to see multiplication because God's a multiplier. God's not going to increase things percent up, 10, 20, 50%. No, he's going to multiply, right? So it's very simple calculations for precious metals. Let's use silver as the example. Minimum blessings are 30. So that would put silver anywhere between $500 and $600 very soon. And then you got to go beyond the 60 is that would be 1,200-ish. And then 100-fold would be $2,000 to $2,500 silver. That's coming.
Wow.
So that would take like a roll of 25. So at this massive, at 100-fold, right? So like a tube of 20 eagles would be worth over $50,000.
That is unbelievable.
And silver is such a great thing because somebody can buy a silver coin for $25,
right?
Less than that, like
right. So
less than 2 people going to McDonald's.
Yeah, times 1,000 is $2,500 a coin. My point is the financial system is about to blow up. The next 3.5 months will be mind-blowing. Will be a time the world's never going to forget because this is all ordained by God. And if I'm right on my calculations, based on what I showed you for coronavirus, 3.5 years takes us into this summer. It directly lines up on the same exact date of when a new era could be birthed. It's 9 months to the mark. And then that leads us into the next 3.5-year cycle, which freakishly, and by no other reason by the design of God, is 3.5 years with the Haman effect because of next 3 years specifically, you've got blood moons indicating what's going to be happening to the people that went and mocked God for the past generations. Okay. So it's going to, so that leads us into harvest, and the harvest is this fall. So this will be, the greatest harvest the world has ever seen. It'll be a time the world's never going to forget. But what is harvest, right? It's a time of, it'll be great for some and hell on earth for others.
Is that what you call it?
But we got about 60 seconds here. I want to bring up your QR code so people can go to your site. They need to be, if you're in trading, if you want to know what's going on in the financial markets, you go to gold2020forecast.com. But if you can bring up the QR code on the screen here, if you have access to the screen, you can take a shot of that. If not, if you want access to these slides, you can text 40509, the word BOW, and you can get the slides, which will bring you to this slide. And you can pull down the free PDF. It gives you a discount if you're part of Flyover family to subscribe to his actual charts. BOW says, hey, here's what I'm doing. Here's what I'm looking at. And then he makes that available to people as well. So there's a lot of things available. BOW, we need you back here often between now and July 4th to walk us through this, because I just like, baby steps, say what's happening, play by play.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for just how inquisitive you are, how much you search, how much you research, and just the expertise that you bring. We really appreciate it. And the hope. Every time, truly, every time that we talk to you, every time that you come on our show, I'm always full of hope and truth. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing to help to save this country.
Beverly Hills Precious Metals Exchange is a client-focused firm devoted to assisting our clients with precious metals. Our clients range from first-time to serious coin collectors and investors seeking to add precious metals to their investment portfolios. We are not interested in volatile investments, leveraged products, and intangible assets. With rising inflation and a devaluing of the dollar hurting middle-class families, investing in gold and silver ensures protection for your hard-earned money. Save the value of your money today by investing in gold and silver at Beverly Hills Precious Metals.
For more great content, go to flyoverconservatives.com.
Discover the Ozempic Zone.
Join those already taking Ozempic. Ask your healthcare provider about Ozempic.
Madam President, with me today is Mr. Seth Brazier, who is one of my colleagues in my Senate office. Madam President, I'm going to talk about my city today, the city of New Orleans. The city of New Orleans is iconic, and the whole world knows it. My first job in state government was with a reform governor back in the late 1980s named Governor Buddy Roemer. Japan was doing extraordinarily well at that time economically, making many foreign investments, and Governor Roemer traveled to Japan to try to convince Japan to invest in Louisiana. And when the governor got back, he told me, he said, Kennedy, my first meeting was very enlightening. He said, my first meeting, I met with about 50 Japanese business people.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hi, everybody. So I have Scott Yates here with me today, and we're going to have a conversation about a lot of different things, but we're going to also talk about how things seem to be splitting right now, and timelines and consciousness and all of that kind of stuff. So I'd love to hear a little bit about you, Scott. I know that you're a brilliant tarot reader, and you have a spirituality that hasn't been acknowledged for a long time. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Thank you. First off, thank you for having me, honey. I admire you very much, and it's an honor to be with you tonight.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, since you brought up that I am now a professional tarot card reader, which is a dream that I had that I would be when I was in my early 30s. I guess I'll tell you about the first time I found a deck of tarot cards in my sister's closet. I lived with my sister. I can never remember why I was rummaging through my sister's closet, which is kind of funny, but I came across this deck of tarot cards, and I've always been very interested in these things. There's a place in Florida called Talladega that my mother used to go to a lot for psychic readings and tarot cards. She told me recently, one time she brought me with her, and I was like 7, and the psychic there told her that I was going to go on to do great things in this with psychic world, even though I don't consider myself a psychic. Anyways, I found these cards, and I read the book a little bit, and I did some readings for myself, and I was really shocked. It really seemed to get me really good. And my sister's friend was there, and I asked her if she would be my first, querent. So I told her some things were happening at work. There were some people that were jealous of her, and she had these problems, and she kind of stopped me in the middle of it, and I really didn't even know what I was doing. And she's like, how do you know this about me? And then she's like, accused me of stalking her. And that's when it really clicked with me that, wow, there's something happening here. And I really didn't want to go through my life as running a printing press like my father did his whole life. But I didn't think anybody would accept this long-haired 30-something-year-old guy to be a tarot card reader. And also I didn't know where to learn, where to begin. So it's just one of those ideas, I put on the back burner. And fast forward to 2020, and I'm an English teacher for 18 years. And because I refused to get the jab, I lost my job and was looking at losing everything. By the way, this was a really good test for me because I've been gaining more and more confidence that no matter what, the universe always provides for us, the things we need to keep us alive. And at that time, I was looking at losing everything, but I wouldn't let it get to me. Even though I wasn't eating very much every day and I was barely paying my bills, I would stop outside and just notice a flower or the sound of a bird singing or just the simple things, like the fact that I live in Thailand and I live in such a beautiful place and the weather's so nice. And it's like, okay, yeah, I'm poor as dirt. And I might be losing everything, but that's okay. I'm grateful for what I do have. And so I would be in that place of gratitude. Then one day it dawned on me, almost like a bolt from the blue, that I've been watching Janine for 2.5 years, and by the way, studying her and absorbing her knowledge. And I'd been telling a friend, I think I could do what Janine does, not at her level, but I think I can do that. And so it was my birthday. I got $10 from my mom for my birthday, and I went to the bookstore. Didn't even know I could buy tarot cards around here. I went to the bookstore. Sure enough, they had tarot cards, and slowly built up my confidence. And through feedback from other people, it's like when I became an English teacher. I had no clue if I was doing a good job or not until the faculty and the students and the parents would come to me and they'd tell me, "Wow, Scott, you're the best teacher we've ever had here." And the same things with tarot. So I have no idea what I'm telling the people is accurate or is helping, but then they come back and tell me, "Wow, you were spot on about this. You were spot on about that." And so I slowly built up confidence in myself, began trusting myself. And then I figured, okay, well, I'm going to starve to death, so I might as well start trying to put myself out there. And been doing it for a year now. And I have to say that it's been the most gratifying work that I've ever done, way to earn money. And yeah, that's all.
That's great though. Yeah, being ourselves is the biggest gift we can give to the world, I think. And we get talked out of that as children. That's not important. Just do it just like everybody else does it. And that really gets in the way. And that was created on purpose. So
well, that what you just said there, do it like everybody else does. That was pretty much impossible for me because of the severe level of dyslexia that I have. I was, I didn't fit in the academic world. I just didn't fit in with people in general, so I had to make a choice very early on, either try to do it the way they want me to do it and fail every time, or just follow my own path and do things my own way. And when I do things my own way, they just work for me,
Right.
Yeah, I do things completely counterintuitive to what we're taught, right? My cousin totally flipped out about 10 years ago when he asked me, how much money I had saved for retirement or something like that. And I'm like, we're not going to live to an age where, like our parents did, that they retire and then, it's going to be totally different. We don't have to save money now. We don't have to prepare for that, because something was coming. At that time, I didn't know quite what it was. Something is coming, and we're going to be living in a totally different world by the time I'm 65, 70 years old. By the way, I'll be 60 in October. So yeah, I was just different, and I embraced that, and got to a point where, yeah, I didn't care that people laughed at me, and I don't know, people didn't laugh at me, but just didn't understand me. But one thing I did get sick of was where I was born, in the social position I was born into. I didn't have anybody around that I really connected with, and and living in America, but I didn't feel like I belonged there. So that's when I got the idea that, well, if I live in a place that's very foreign to me and I'm not supposed to belong there, then it's okay. See? So in America, I look normal, I look like everybody else, but I'm not like you. Therefore, I was a fish out of water. Here, I don't look like anybody and I don't sound like anybody, but it's okay. I'm not supposed to. So it's like acceptable somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's a great way to think of it. Could just be more of yourself, and they're like, "Oh, well, all Americans are that way."
Yeah, well, they coming to a place like Thailand isn't like, say, going to Mexico. It's truly alien here. The culture, the language, it's tonal. There's like in Spanish and American. They come from Latin, and you have a lot of you can make out words just from that. But here, the language is completely different, and everything, culture, but I was so at home here when I got here the first time. So I know I got this in meditations, that I had been Thai in another life. I had been an abbot, apparently, in a past life, one who was quite powerful, but who was also quite wicked and did a lot of harm. And it was important for me to, and then I came back here and I was a teacher for 18 years and I gave back so much. I had nearly 1,000 students every year. And every single one of those students, I imparted a bit of myself into them, you know. So I feel like I made up for, I hope I made up for whatever I'd done in that past life that was wicked.
Well, and all of us have had to have dark past lives. It's part of the learning process. It's just how far do you take it? Like some of the people these days have taken it so far that they actually have to basically they have to go back to the beginning. But a lot of us have had a dark life where it was mainly for learning. And we were doing bad things, but not beyond, like not to that degree. If you get my drift, yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up. I think it's important that people understand that there needs to be a dark side in order to have a light. You know, I get a little bit tedious with the people who express so much hatred and anger and wish for revenge and justice against those who have been doing, you know, the dark side. You know, they were playing a role, you know, and if we were living in a different age where there was nothing but light and it was just this homogeneous light and there was no like adversity, then I probably I'd come back in an evil form again, you know, to bring back that balance. Anyway. Yeah,
it's an important contrast for right now. It did, I feel, go a little further than it needed to, but it's so important, especially in the 3D, to have the polarity that people need to learn. So.
Right.
Yeah.
So, brought it up before. I guess maybe now's a good time to talk about how your art inspired me. When and maybe you have that one frame, the one that I used in my video. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sure I do. So this one.
That's the one.
Is now you used it in your video to illustrate something that is true, but intended, you know, what I was intending is to show that there is a bottom and a top. And here in the middle is how the Earth, basically, the Earth spins a whole lot slower than we think. And it's a toroidal field, so it's not perfectly round either. But those sides are scraped as she goes through space, because space is not a void, like they say. It's actually part of the waters. So space is, I guess it's more like a plasma or a gelatin. And it scrapes away. So nobody lives on the sides of planet Earth. But I get that the people on the bottom are more ET-like. And they're 3D. So they've been 3D just like we've been 3D. And now they're also going through their ascension process as well. Because Earth has become, she's way ahead of us kind of at the moment. She's crystalline. So yeah.
Okay. So
the video is really cool to illustrate. To illustrate what we're going to talk about.
But maybe not accurate to what you're getting. So well, let me just show the video real quick.
Yeah.
And
no, what we're going to talk about is it's part of what is happening. So it's just I didn't make a picture like that. So this is good.
I was when I made this video, and I'm not a great editor or anything, but I was trying to reproduce what I was seeing in my mind. Right. So let me go ahead and share this screen here.
Nobody's gonna know. Nobody's gonna know. They're gonna know.
I put it on YouTube and it's got sound, but here there's no sound.
Okay.
First, I just wanted to show. I gave you credit there.
Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, we have the upper one and the bottom one. Now, this is a cell.
Right.
And this is from a video on YouTube, animated video that shows mitosis, cell mitosis. And so anyways, when I saw yours, it just reminded me of this structure. And you see how these are actually the chromosomes. And it's like these are the land masses, and they pull apart further apart before it then divides.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, look how they kind of fit together there. So
yeah, I think it's really cool.
Thank you. I had fun doing it. So these things, as above, so below. The microcosmic world is reflected in the macrocosm. Anyways, I just want to share that with you, and I thought it was really cool.
It is, yeah, and it illustrates the split that's going on. And basically, I define it more as a timeline split, but we're in a holographic universe, so there is a physicality to it as well. And when I first started talking about all this stuff, like that wouldn't come in, and I think it was because my higher self was really not thinking it was in my highest good to be thinking about timelines and splits and all of that. She just wanted me to get across what I had already received from her. But as we went on, I did receive that there is a split, and there will be more than one, I feel like, because I feel like we've already had one at this point. So part of, like, the old Earth is already gone, if you think about it, because our Earth has become crystalline, and she is in the process of upgrading and ascending, and she's gotten a new soul aspect within her. So she is like taken off right now. And also she's become more sovereign, like we are going to be. So she's not really allowing all that negativity to continue. So I think we don't give Earth enough credit. Like, she's a powerhouse. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, you mentioned something that now I need to understand.
Okay.
You have said that we have entered into, the Earth is already existing in a crystalline state, and that our bodies are as well.
Yeah.
Now, real quick, before you get into your explanation, when I was a kid, even though I was severely dyslexic, I loved books and English and writing, and I wanted to be a writer, and I loved science fiction. And I took a writing class in high school, and I wrote a short story. And in my short story, I think I got it from Carl Sagan or some scientist, that it's possible that on another world there could be life based on silica or silicon or crystalline. And so in my story, I invented crystalline aliens, and their bodies were like quartz crystals that had joints in, but they had soft, squishy organs, which I never could figure out how I was going to explain that. But it's just really cool that, when I was like 16, 17 years old, I was imagining crystalline bodies and crystalline beings. And so now, kind of like in my story, I'm still squishy, right? I'm still flesh and blood. The Earth is still, well, there are crystals. But can you explain what do you mean by that exactly? That
Well,
now.
So this is the first time that people will ascend inside of a body. So that means the body has to change. So there's densities. But what we're doing is we're creating a body that will contain more light. It has the ability to contain more light. It also has the ability to live longer. So our bodies are going to be able to contain more of our true selves, like more of our soul, because we have kind of like an oversoul or a higher self. And I've always received that only 10% of us came down into this body. But that percentage is growing now. And ascension is partially, the things that are going to happen is you're going to have more gifts. You're going to remember who you are. The veil is going. So all of that stuff is because your body is able to contain more of yourself, your true self. So it's almost like it's able to be a bigger cup, right? But the crystalline is changing from carbon to crystalline. So we're carbon based now, but most of us old souls, star seeds, whatever you want to call us, we're mostly done with the crystalline system. And as we go through ascension, there will be things that we don't have anymore, that we don't need. So organ wise, the nervous system is going to disappear. We're not going to need that anymore. We're not going to have that stress level. And what's cool to me is you are actually bringing through the truth, because ETs have the crystalline body already, especially if they're above the third density. So that's what we're doing, is the human body is changing into the crystalline form along with the earth. We're not going to look a whole lot different, but we can change our body in the future as we learn. We'll be able to like become younger on our own. A lot of us will get into a med bed. That's a great bridge. But we'll be able to be how we want to look, because we'll realize that we are the manifestors. We came from source. We are part of source. So we have that ability, and we're manifesting now. So the manifesting we're doing now, it's really important to pay attention to what you're actually manifesting.
Yeah.
Are you manifesting good stuff or bad stuff? Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I went through a couple of years of that not long ago, and I kept telling myself, get your act together, Scott. Stop thinking about those things and stop manifesting those things that you don't want. It can be hard, because you start on this spiral, this downward spiral. And
90% of our brain is the subconscious. Like, so we have all of this subconscious stuff. And what's happening is, as the light codes come in, we're starting to release it. One of the things I used to do was help people release it. Like, my higher self would talk to their higher self. We would find the blocks and we would basically neutralize them. And that was really helpful for people. But I'm not doing individual stuff anymore, so that's not happening. But it's happening on a slower like timeline because of ascension. So it's great to cry it out, or go in a room and scream if you need to. Like, whatever you need to do to just release stuff is really good, but don't hurt other people in the process.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I did go through some kind of weird physical transformation right at the same time when I got my tarot cards. There was a period there when my body erupted with rashes, horrible rashes. And one of them, and I had to show a friend of mine a picture. It looked like a hand right here. It looked like a burn. It looked like a poison ivy type of thing, right? But it was the shape of a hand. I mean, you could make out the fingers, and I felt like I was under attack constantly. The floor of my house collapsed, and a bunch of insects came out, and I got infested. Like, my legs got all tore up. I had a cyst on my back that had been there for 30 years. My father had one for his whole life that never got inflamed. Suddenly it erupted and started, emptying. So I felt like toxins. I felt like these were toxins, or these were things that were just pouring out of my body. Yeah. And I felt different spiritually. I felt some weird change was coming over me. It was very, very strange.
I would say you were getting rid of the blocks to your future, and that was coming out through your body. You were probably also getting attacked, because when you're about ready to make that leap into who you really are, most people get attacked in some way, because it has been very unwanted by the dark. And another thing is we still were in the middle of kind of the lower fourth density, which I see as the lower fourth astral plane. Like, it's connected to that, and it's a very yucky, there's lots of entities and yucky stuff and black, and magic and all that kind of stuff. So you were still, you were pushing through that as well. So I'm sure it felt very weird. Yeah.
Yeah, I felt like they were, trying to get me to break, but I'm very stoic, and it didn't bother me. It was also very strange that year, okay, that I started, like I said, I got my first deck of tarot cards on my birthday. It was it was the 20th of October, and that was also a full moon. And there was a lot of talk that particular full moon was a very powerful, for some reason. Also, I followed Janine's instructions about when you want to start a career as a tarot card reader, and you find your archetype from the major arcana, and I did that, and I pulled the moon. So my career started on the full moon. It was my birthday, and I'd just gone through this physical transformation. It was like all meant to be.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I told you this when we met, when you came on my YouTube channel, but my higher self spoke to me. It has spoken to me a couple of times. I can't communicate the way you do, or at least not that I understand it. Anyways, I was 19 years old and I was not excited about starting the life. I just dropped out of high school. I was severely dyslexic. I was poor, came from a poor family. And I thought to myself, this life is going to be really tough. And I considered suicide, and I had a gun to my head. And I was like 50-50 on it. I wasn't really sure. And I was just playing with the gun to see how I felt about it. And that's when my higher self, now I understand it was my higher self. At the time, well, I didn't think it was God. And I never told people God spoke to me, this voice,
Yeah.
and I knew it wasn't my conscious. You know how you talk to yourself, well, what do you want to have for dinner tonight, Scott? Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't that. Anyway, and the voice said, you can't do this. And by the way, it was telepathic, but I heard it as if it was in my head. And it's so funny. I put the gun down and I said to the voice, I think I even like looked up and I said, why not? And it's funny, I wasn't like shocked or surprised by hearing it. It was very natural. It was a very natural conversation. I said, why not? And then the voice said to me, I wish I could remember the exact words, but it was something like, because you are living in the end times, the end of time, or the end of an age and the beginning of a new age. And I think it said, I need you here, or you need to be here. You will need to be here in that time to help people through. And I was very skeptical, and I put the gun down and I said, okay, I'll make a deal with you. I said to the voice, I will start searching for any evidence that this is true. I'm going to give it 1 year. I was 19. I said, I'll give it 1 year. If I don't find any evidence that we're living in this great time of, the apocalypse, then I'm coming back. I'm picking up this gun and I'm going to finish off this job, because I don't want to go through this life, because I know it's going to be really hard. And yeah, it has been hard. It's been fun. It's been a great adventure, but yeah, it's been really hard. Anyways, long story short, I was led to some certain places and through synchronicities. And sure enough, I'm like, wow, we really are living in the end times. I went down a lot of dead ends looking for the path. But I don't regret any of those, because I learned a lot about what, like religion. Okay. I spent 10 years studying the Bible, teaching the Bible, debating theology with like real theologians. And by the way, holding my own with them. And then I discovered, I'm not going to go into it now, but then I discovered a flaw in this religion, which I thought was the best religion in the world. In fact, if I were to be a Christian, I would be this religion, Seventh-day Adventist. But then I discovered a flaw. And when I tried to discuss this with the elders and the people in the church, they're like, no, we're not going to hear that. And I finally got over this need of religion. And I realized that there is no chasm between me and God that needs to be bridged with something like religious rituals or a dogma. Right. And sorry, I kind of got off the track. So imagine how blown away I was in 2020 when I started doing tarot, and I started doing exactly what my higher self told me that I was going to be doing, and that we are living in the end of an old age and the beginning of a new age. Mm-hmm. I was so relieved, because I was starting to wonder if it was going to happen, to be honest with you. I got all excited in 2001 when that happened, on September 11th, because I thought, okay, things are taking off now. We're not far from the end now. And then years go by, and I kind of I didn't give up on it, but I stopped making it the center focus of my life, and I just started living my life, having fun, being more free. And then COVID happened, and as soon as it happened, and when I saw the date when they announced that it was a pandemic, which was March 11th, which is a critical date for the cabal, I said, oh, okay, this is it. And it was on my list of vehicles, like meteors, fake alien invasion, World War III, which maybe we're still gonna have. We won't have World War III, but the threat
drama though. We'll have some drama for sure. Yeah.
So I was so happy when the pandemic started, and and everybody else is like, why are you happy? I'm like, because my life has been validated. I lived my whole life based on this, this deal I made with my higher self when I was 19 years old. And I was starting to wonder if it was ever going to come to fruition. And now here I am. I use these cards to help people, just you know what people tell me? One of the main things people tell me after a reading with me, they feel lighter. They feel lighter.
Yeah.
So I'm raising their vibration one person at a time, and then they go out and they raise other people's vibrations. And to me, that's more important than having 100,000 YouTube followers. You know, and I'm earning a living. That you're doing something that I'm very proud of, and you know, I've never been so happy. You know, in this
I
stage of
think
my
it's
life,
great.
it's so bizarre. It's so bizarre because most of the world is miserable, right? People have lost their businesses, they've lost their homes, they've lost so much. So the people who were on top when I was on the bottom, and it's gone like this now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's part of the shift. I don't know if you ever studied Taoism, but my dad was really into it, right? So, and then you have all the elements, and he's like, the metals are always on top. They're always winning. They always get all the stuff, right? And now the metal, because that consciousness has such a hard time shifting, they're having the hardest time. So that, you know, because you have the fire and the water and the air and the, you know, all that. But the metals, they used to be the ones that were on the top, and they would hit you on the head if you didn't do what they wanted you to do, basically. And it just depends on the kind of metal too, because there are people that are like gold or silver, you know, and you can just kind of feel their energy. But I always thought it was really interesting. I'm like, ooh, the Iron Age is over.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Iron is not doing so well anymore. Like, yeah. So just a little tidbit.
Well,
So we were going to talk about the split. I noticed the other day, and I don't know if you noticed this, like how big of a place you live in, like population wise, but I noticed that it seemed like there was less people last weekend. And somebody else had mentioned it to me, and they're like, I'm on a 5-lane highway or freeway. There's one car in front of me and it's rush hour. I don't understand what's happening. And we went to go pick something up. So we were out in the world, you know, we kind of live in the boonies, but we were out in the world next to the towns and stuff. And I'm like, where's all the traffic? Nobody's here. And then we went downtown and shopped. And I was like, there's half the people here than there normally is on a Saturday at lunch. So I think that when Earth went crystalline, we had a drop of NPCs happen. So I think some of the NPCs actually just disappeared. Yeah. So
I'm in Asia and it's pretty crowded here. It's one of the things that I don't like about it. It's very hard to find like a little bit of nature where there's not just people everywhere. But I haven't been out much. It's for one thing, it's just really a hot time of year, and I just don't get out much. But I don't know. There might be something to that because I've noticed the market's not as full of people. I don't know. I'm gonna have to pay attention. I'm gonna have to pay attention to that a bit more. I thought it was because school's out and there are fewer cars out right now.
Mm-hmm. It just depends on your area. The person that sent me the picture of the highway or the freeway, it is a time spring break when they should have had an extra 2 million people in that city. And there's like nobody there. So there's something weird going on. And I would just look around in your own city, you know, for everybody, for the audience, like what's going on out there. Because I feel like it's already happening. Like we're already seeing that split happen. So there's an interesting thing.
Just looking to see if I had anything else here. Oh, the solar flash, you mentioned that. And it reminded me of a dream I had. So I went through this one period of time. It was 96. In 96, I was unemployed and I had 3 roommates. So I had the whole summer off. And this was at the peak of my my interest in shamanism and experimenting with mushrooms. And so that whole summer, I did a lot of mushrooms, especially after I'd read in High Times magazine that psilocybin had no lethal limit. So I tested that. I think I ingested 80 mushrooms at one time once.
Oh my
Uh,
God.
and it's funny because when you
Sounds
get to
like
a certain,
days of interesting
well,
events.
no, it doesn't though. It's like, it's not like LSD or mescaline where the more you take, it gets more. It just kind of gets to a certain limit, and then
Oh,
and maybe
those
because
drugs.
I'd been doing it all summer too, you know. But one of the things that happened during the course of doing that is I noticed I could see through the veil. So like at night when I'd lay down to sleep and I'd close my eyes, I could see a tunnel of light and I could see figures moving around in it. I thought that was really interesting. But
That's
I had a dream one night, but it didn't feel like a sleeping dream. It felt like I was actually there, and it was. Now you have to remember, it couched in the belief system that I had at the time, which was the second coming of Christ. It was the sun, but the sun just blasted me with this light, and I felt my body just disintegrated, and for a split second, I was in complete oneness with the universe. And when I was listening to you and Z and Aubrey talking about this, and yeah, it reminded me of that dream.
yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I think the ascension, like as we like hit the peak of it, and then we come into the new world, that moment is almost going to feel like a death and rebirth. And it's going to be so beautiful, really. That's, that split second. But I feel like it's just going to elongate. Like, I don't know if you've ever had a near-death experience, but that moment just like stretches out. And it's such a beautiful thing. And we're just going to experience something so magical on the other side of it.
Which brings me to the last thing I want to show you, and then I think we can end this because I haven't had dinner tonight, and I kind of get
okay.
hungry. After I had that experience with my higher self, and I was into a lot of different things, but for some reason I had this idea of like this new age, the golden age, the way I think I was calling it back then, the golden age. And this was before I really had a vocabulary, or we didn't have YouTube in the 90s. And anyways, I was looking through these posters, and I saw this poster, and it was what I envisioned the new Earth to look like, and that's what I want to show you here. And it's funny because this was just a piece of paper. It was a paper posters that I had on my wall for years and years.
Yeah.
And so of course it didn't hold up, and eventually it rotted away, and I lost it. And a few years ago, somebody posted it on a Telegram group. I'm like, that's it. That's my vision of what our new Earth is going to look like. And by the way, I grew up in Florida, and we had a causeway to the beach. We didn't have mountains, but there was something about the causeway that struck me because it looked like my home. And I'm also noticing now that it looks crystalline.
Yeah, it does. That's beautiful.
So I just wanted to share this with you, and this was, I've been trying. By the way, I used to stare at this and manifest. I was trying to manifest it. So it's like, I know that one day I'm going to wake up and this is the world I'm going to see.
Oh yeah, you will.
So that's all. I just share that.
I love that. That's like
that's the path all I have.
to it, Beautiful. Well, that's a good thing to end on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and let me tell your viewers who don't know me that I do private tarot card readings. And you can email me. I'm sure Honey will put my email in the address. I have a YouTube channel, which I got because recently my YouTube channel got popular, and I've been getting a lot of requests for bookings. So it takes me a while to get to you, just be patient. And really, my personal readings is that's my full-time endeavor. That's where I feel like I can do the most good for people. And YouTube is just something it was like a creative outlet for me at first. When I had nothing to do, I would make these videos about, like, I love the one I did on Bigfoot, Sasquatch.
Awesome. Yeah.
So now I just do a live show with my good friends Dan and Veronica where we take viewers' questions and we talk about current events. And Jason Q joins me Sunday
Oh,
nights.
awesome. Okay.
But if you would like a private reading with me, first-time clients, I charge $50. And I realize that's kind of low compared to a lot of tarot card readers. And I want to explain why it's so low. I live in Thailand and my overhead is very low. So I'm able to do at that price. If I lived in America, I would charge double what I charge. The first one's $50. And kind of like my friend Dan says, it's like a crack dealer, you know, I give somebody a little taste and then they come back. But yeah, and then if for returning clients, it's $70, and I do an hour and a half, and I record it on Zoom, and then I send you the recording. And I would love to do a tarot card reading for you out there if you're listening.
Yeah, I would definitely do that.
And
that's a brilliant price point for a lot of people. Like, it's amazing.
Yeah, that's the thing. I want to be available. And by the way, if there are some people out there who seriously need some sort of guidance, or usually what it is, it's and like they already know, but they just wanted to get confirmation or something. And there are people out there now who don't have any money. And if you're one of those people and you really need some help, tell me your story. And if it's something that I think I can help you with, I'll do it for free. Okay. So I want to put that out there too, because being true to the mission that I was given when I was 19 years old, I'm here to help people. And I don't, I can spare 30 minutes for you if you have questions, and you don't have to pay me. So just want to put that out there too.
That's very sweet and kind. Yeah. Yep. Thank you, Scott. This has been beautiful. And I really appreciate what you're doing. And I also really think that you have no idea how big of a being you actually are. So it's great to see that humility, and what you're doing with your cards. You are contacting your higher self. So
yeah, I do understand that now.
Yeah. It's beautiful to see. Looks like the internet
thank you.
being crazy. So it must be time. Okay. I hope you enjoy your dinner.
I will. And thank you so much for this. And I hope we can talk again sometime. Maybe we'll have something more specific to talk about. And maybe next time I'll pull some cards. But I don't like doing like big world events sort of things. I like doing more quirky things. Like I said, Bigfoot and more fun. Just have fun with it.
It's hard to there's things that shift, and people don't necessarily want to hear that, but things shift, and then the date that you gave or the approximation that you gave, it doesn't work anymore. And sometimes when you put it out there, that actually stops it from happening. So
funny. I heard you say this the other day, and I started laughing because it's yet again something I've been saying for a long time. And then you said I was getting mad at people on Telegram, like, stop predicting these dates. Every time you make a predicted date, then it has to change to another date. Just stop doing that. It's gonna come at a time when everybody's gonna be surprised. When that whatever big flash thing happens, everybody's gonna go, wow, I wasn't expecting it to look like that and to happen then and everything else. So. And I want to reiterate what you said with your friends Aubrey and Z. Put down the conspiracy theory videos sometimes, and just go outside and feel the fresh air and listen to the birds sing and do something fun. I started playing a role-playing game that I first played when I was 17 years old. Didn't think I would ever get to play it again, Dungeons and Dragons. And then I found a group online, and I spend so much time creating my character. I write his backstory, and he comes alive for me. And I have so much fun. And when I play, I role play, and I act like a little kid. And people need to do that. Just put down the serious stuff for a little while, and do something that you did as a kid that you loved and you haven't done for a long time. I love that message.
Yeah. I do too. It's time to manifest joy. That's for sure. Yeah.
All right, honey. Well, it's been great. I love chatting with you. I love everything that you're doing on the internet, and be seeing you again, I'm sure.
I'm sure you will. Thank you so much for coming. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Yay! Recordings just got better. Hey, it's Dana from StreamYard. I'm so excited to announce that local recordings are now available on StreamYard. Have you ever done a recording where your guest just had terrible internet issues? They were blurry, they were freezing, you could almost hardly hear them. Well, with local recordings from StreamYard, you'll be able to download a perfect quality video from your guest after the show. This means that no matter what you or your guest's internet connection is like, you'll be able to download the perfect high quality recording every single time. You can also download both a separate audio and a separate video file for the hosts and guests. Now with StreamYard, you can have freeze-free studio quality recordings on any connection, anywhere in the world. You can choose to download them, stream them later, or edit and repurpose them. It's your turn to test out local recordings today, now available on StreamYard.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining today's live show. And I have Polny here. He is on YouTube, and I do have his link in the description box below if you'd like to check him out. He knows more about all this kind of things with the money in the markets. And not only is he doing that, and he's been studying that kind of thing, but he also will put it towards prophecy and what's going on. And what he was telling me right before we got on here was actually just like, whoa, of what God has said is going to happen, and then what's actually happening right now. So thank you, Bo, for joining today's show.
Julie, what a pleasure. It's, wonderful seeing you at these events that we do with Clay Clark. And I just, it's been a pleasure knowing you for like 3 years, or I think, or longer, whatever. So at least 3-4 years we've known each other. So what a pleasure. God has sure using you. And I know the world really enjoys it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, it's been awesome how God has really been just moving on so many different things. And even in the midst of all this darkness, we see God show up, and he keeps showing up, and everything he's giving us prophetically, which is what I say, God's news before the news, because it's God's report. And all of a sudden it shows up in their news reports, and it's just like mind boggling. Sometimes I'm like, I just get like this hyper. I'm like, oh my gosh, Lord, you said that. So it's fun. It's fun to sit there and see what he says and then compare it to what's going on in our news feeds today. So it's awesome.
Yeah. And like you say, the news before the news, how does that happen? Right. Well, we're going to talk about that, but basically this is all based on God being in charge of everything, right? So everything happening is under God's control. And we're going to start off, we'll go through a presentation, but the point I'm saying is that God wrote the end from the beginning. How do you know? Go study scriptures, Old Testament. And I think one of the best prophetic words ever put out was a prophecy that of Daniel 2, which was given to Nebuchadnezzar 2,500 years ago. This is insane because it's an impossibility for any human to ever put together a prophecy. That's 2,500 years. But that's why you can do the news before the news, because God already knows the end.
Yep.
That's why it's the news before the news. God knows the end. And that's why ultimately, we win. So what is there to fear? And so this whole podcast is going to be about the good news. It's all good news, but I want to take the time today to layer in the study and the understanding of timing, because when you understand the timing of things, then it takes that stress away. Because I know there's a lot of people stressed in the world right now with what's going on with 45 and and just basically just what's been going on with the whole world and why it's this way. But when you understand scriptures and revelation, what is revelation? It's the reveal. So things we're going to talk about today, I'll talk about, are far superior to where they were a year ago or 2 years ago, right? And so because God reveals things to his servants, right? But we're not supposed to know everything until it's time to know those things.
That's right.
Because if we know things too early, that's not good either, right? And for the same reason that Moses didn't know that the Red Sea was going to part. He just thought, God's got to do something, but we're in a whole heck of a mess here, pinned up against the Red Sea, right? Something's got to blow, something's got to happen. But then lo and behold, God had a plan. So it was the news before the God already had the plan. So that's the whole thing about, understanding prophecy, that, it's amazing. And God uses you in incredible ways, just to give you those prophetic words, because, we know it's scriptural, right? God is nothing before first speaking through his servants, the prophets. But again, the checkmate move that we're waiting for, right? That moment in time that, that's written, in one of our interviews was, in a single day, the kings of the earth will weep and wail, right? And that scripture is Revelation 18 or 17. But the point is, in a single day, it's 24 hours. And the thing is that those 24 hours, that moment in time is a secret. Because if evil knew what God would do and how he would do it, and the moment he would do it, evil would try to create a counter. And so when God sets a stage, there's never a counter. I think one of your prophetic words were, what's about to happen is a complete wipeout of the chessboard.
Yeah, taking them all out in the whole house of cards. And why? Because God is he's the most high God. No one and nothing is bigger than God. So no matter what we see, and we say today, we say this all the time, there's nothing that's going to be God. There's just nothing that's going to be God. So I'll share this here. I'll add this to this. There we go.
Yeah. So what we're heading into is, okay, so first off, there's just incredible amount of work that I put into these slides, and I'm going to try to go through them quickly. Your viewers that are listening today, I highly recommend, if you go to second page, right, the second page right here as we're talking, this is a QR code. I've given you the QR, the actual click code as well, too. If you can put it below later on in the interview at the bottom section. But if you want to scan this like you go to a restaurant, you can download. It's like 100 pages that I put together here and give this is like free presentation for the world. But this will answer a lot of the questions that you actually discussed this morning, Julie, in your podcast that you did before we came online here. So, we'll discuss a lot of this, but the details are all in here, and the viewers will get a better understanding of the timeline. And the reason is because we are now at a really critical time point, right? This today is, as insane as this is, Julie, we are today on, this is the day that I've done, like, I don't know, 20, 30 podcasts talking about the importance of April 6th. And I just happened to be on with the Julie Green on April 6th, Passover. But this is better yet. Do you understand that this is sunset right now as we're speaking? It's actually sunset right now in Israel.
I did not know that. That's awesome.
If you just check the time right now, basically the sunset's right now. It was like 3-4 minutes ago. Sunset. This will be the first night, because it's 3 nights in the tomb, right? So it's Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and then it's the resurrection Sunday. So in other words, it's very, very powerful time point. And the correlations that are happening in this world, you got to admit, Julie, are rather staggering. Like before Jesus was put on the cross, right? The authorities came to get him. Sound familiar? What happened a couple days ago? Like, I'm just showing you how awesome our God is. See, when you read Ecclesiastes, that which has been will be again. There is nothing new under the sun. Now, the point I'm making with that is that you've stated this before too in some of your podcasts, right? The spirits are the same of old, right? Yeah. So if you go back to, they're the Nephilim spirits, the demonic spirits, but the characters, the people are different, right? And so I take it a step further, and I also look at the time windows. And so we look at historic time windows of the Old Testament, and then if you look at those time windows, we're going to talk about, but it's incredible because the United States is a covenant nation, just like Israel. And so what happened to I guess will be the brother Israel, is now those same time windows are overlaying on our present day. And so we're seeing extreme similarities in regard to the timing of things. And then God's even given us another look forward with what's called Revelation. So April 6th is critical. This is, you talked about this, but basically the critical time point, is God's checkmate. These people, from what I'm calculating, and you'll see why, but basically the end of June is a critical time point for all of this to kind of come to a head. Again, I might go through some of this stuff quickly, but the viewers can just go later on and re-listen to this in podcast a couple of times, because we're going to cover a lot of information. But you got the PDF slides, and so you can cover through. So we know that Trump is God's anointed. You've already spoken those words. Okay, so we know that, and it's interesting. From when you look at the time when how this all went through, from when he was born to his first day in office, 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days. But the crazier part was, I just discovered this 2 days ago. God showed me, the dude said, do this calculation. So from the day he was born, 77 years and 7 days is the summer solstice.
Wow, that's crazy.
Exact day. So let me ask you a question, Julie. What does light do to darkness?
What is what?
What does light do to darkness?
It destroys it.
That's right. So the summer solstice, is a day of most light. So what we're seeing since Christmas time, right? Since the winter solstice, every day is getting lighter and more is getting what? Exposed. How crazy is this, right? So we're heading into the summer solstice and the calculations are pointing to the end of June where literally these people are going to be destroyed. So this is the fall of the puppet masters. These are, the Khazarian mafia that goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden. Okay. These people have unlimited money, unlimited funds. And as you know, they've controlled everything in our world, from the church, the family, education, government, entertainment, media. And how do they do it all, Julie? This is when you talk about today. They did it with the money. They enslaved humanity with the money.
So did Pharaoh. That's how he enslaved the Israelites, with money. Yeah.
No different than the present day pharaohs. You're exactly, 100% right. And so this is the prophecy that I was telling you about. So, we've got this story in this is Babylon, right? It's mystery Babylon because they work in the shadows. So that's what they do. They're the world puppet masters. You don't see them, right? They work behind the stage, right? So they're pulling the strings of all the world leaders to control humanity. So that's why it's called mystery Babylon. But this prophecy, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, the papacy, United States, Julie, 2,500 years, every piece of it has happened, except the last one. And this is what Julie's been talking about when she does her podcast. This is what God is talking about, right? And it says, this is the cool part, right? Daniel 2, verse 34. It says, while you were watching, we get to see this happen.
God's awesome.
Isn't this great? He's telling us we get to watch the fall of Babylon, a stone, which is Jesus Christ, okay? But it's also going to represent his money, Haggai 2, verse 8, silver and gold, because basically when the kingdom rises, right, the godly kingdom, God's going to use his money, right? And so God's going to destroy the financial system. So a stone carved out by no human.
No hands. Yep.
What does that mean? It means that God is going to get the glory. Okay. 45 not allowed to get the glory.
That's right.
1 days not to get the glory. No one's allowed to get the glory. Only God. And once the world knows that there is a God, because that's the whole point. Most of the world is asleep. Okay. Once the world knows that there is a God, then man can start getting some wins. But that's why there's been no wins so far, because God's got to get the glory. Now, these are some cool things. Okay, so we know the story about Belshazzar, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. So do you understand? Can you believe this? But this happened on Passover, Julie.
It did?
Yeah, it happened on Passover. So Passover started yesterday, the sunset on the 5th of April, and it goes to the 13th. Okay, so what day is God going to act? I don't know. But I do know that God moves on his feasts. Julie can confirm that.
Yeah, he does.
We don't know the day or the hour this could happen. Is God going to move this Passover? No one knows. It's God's secret.
He only gives us the times in the season. He gives us the days and the times in the seasons. He doesn't give us an exact day. We just have to look to these seasons and look to the Hebrew calendar, because they are the keeper of time. They truly are. The Jews are still the keeper of time. And so when we see this, he's telling us, hey, you may not know the exact day or the hour, but you will know the season that these things happen in.
Bingo. And that's exactly the point I'm trying to make. We don't know what hour, what day God's going to act as his secret. But the thing is, if God's going to do it, see, the Jewish people are holding God's calendar. It's God's calendar. It's not the Jewish calendar. It's God's calendar. Right. They just happen to be the ones that are holding the calendar. So what happened to Belshazzar? The writing on the wall freaked him out. Daniel had to come give the interpretation. God has numbered your days and your reign has been brought to an end. You've been weighed in the balance, the scales of balance, and found deficient, meaning your financial system is completely out of balance. And your kingdom has been divided and will be given to the Medes and the Persians. But again, that which has been will be again. This time it's going to be given to what? The bride, the church. And we're going to talk about it because you actually said it this morning in your podcast. You actually said, I have it written down later on the slide, but you actually said something on the lines of, when evil does come to power, the church has got the money. Because the earth was made for man, not for Satan, and the tables were flipped. And that's what's been going on. So
really quick, and that's the reason why the enemy has gone after the church, to make the church feel like or believe that the money is evil and they should not want it. Why would people believe that? Because then it's in the enemy's and the evil's hands. I mean, it's really like there's been such a wool over the church's eyes that we can't pray for that and we can't have that. No. The enemy wanted you to believe that so they could take over and do exactly what they're doing right now.
And you actually said a prophetic word about this as well, too. I think it was last year or something. See, they love the money. And your prophetic word through God was when it controls you.
Yeah.
Like if Julie had a million or $1 billion, it wouldn't control her. She would pass it out. Say to myself, right? When you've been down and God raises you up, no one can buy you. Now God's God. You sell yourself to God, right? To Jesus. You're with Jesus. You don't care about the fleshly, but the money allows. If you didn't have to go to work for money, as an example, you can just build and do whatever you want to do. Then you would spend the time doing what? Worshiping God. You see, Satan turned it around. So now we're chasing money. It's idol worship versus chasing God.
Yeah. And look what happened in the Bible. God blessed. Look what he said in Genesis chapter 12 and verse 2. that he would be what? A blessing, to be a blessing. And they would know him because of his blessing. That's basically what that was saying. And he also says in Galatians chapter 3 and verse 29 that we are the seed of Abraham. So that's what we have to look at, the Bible and what God says about these things, and not what religion or legalism or what somebody else has said. Let's go back to the word of God and see what the scriptures say. So I just have to put that in there because people are going to question, because a lot of people are told we are supposed to be poor and we're not supposed to have that. Jesus became poor in his body and destroyed the curse. That did not mean financially. And that's why I just wanted to clear up.
Well, think about this as well, too. What if you read Deuteronomy? We're to be the lenders to the nations.
Yeah.
Where does that, where's that talk about being poverty, right? We're to be the head, not the tail, the lenders to the nation. The wealth of the sinner is stored up for the righteous. Okay. So understand the finances that are coming our way. Why? God's going to strip evil of their finances to give to the church so the church could build the church, the real church, not these cathedrals and everything else, but the real, where we're going to have land and everything we possibly need to prepare ourselves for things that are ahead, that are coming. So, so in terms of timelines, again, what's about to happen? We're stepping into some crazy, awesome times. If you read Revelation 13, verse 11, particularly verse 12, okay, what's coming is the mortal wound to this evil beast system. But also, if you read Revelation, Julie also talked about, there's a tribulation coming. You talked about this morning too. You see, if you read Revelation, it says the mortal wound, which means death. So basically, the beast gets killed, but then it's like the beast is healed. The mortal wound is healed. So that's going to be the resurrection of the beast system that is in tribulation that Julie actually spoke about this morning. But before all that, we've got the greatest years ahead of us we can't even imagine, because God only needs how long, Julie?
Dropbox is linked to my iPad, to my laptop, my Cintiq. I love that.
Just one day. One day is all it takes.
That's right. And so Isaiah 61, Jesus Christ walks in the temple. He reads Isaiah 61. And when you read Isaiah 61, it's an incredible verse because basically he talks about the year of the Lord's favor. And he says, as the scripture was written, it is, as it been read, it is fulfilled. But he never read the last line, the day of vengeance. So Jesus Christ, I want to make this clear, he was the Jubilee. That's what the year of the Lord's favor is. It's a Jubilee. And for God, it's 3.5 years, because how long was Jesus' ministry afterwards? He read this in the synagogue, and then he had his ministry for 3.5 years, right? And he never read the day of vengeance of our God, which we're about to witness. And because who is going to intervene? As you watch, a stone carved out by no human hand. Daniel 2, verse 34. God's going to intervene, and he's going to bring what's called the day of vengeance. And so those that are so concerned of what's going on in the world, there's a lot of women out there, probably half your audience, that have children, right? So women have kids. What happens at birth? Does it hurt a little bit? A little painful, right? And so when you read Matthew 24, expand on this, Julie, but Matthew 24 is very clear. It's very clear. It says, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. Sound familiar? But see to it that you are not alarmed. These things must happen, but the end is still to come. It's not yet.
Yep.
Okay? That's the tribulation that's coming, still to come. All these are the beginnings of what? Birth pains.
Yeah.
So
there's
now,
no evil going to be on the earth, but it's not going to be able to control the body of Christ like it did before. I mean, it's not going to be, perfect until the 1,000-year reign. And of course, after that, but we have to realize that God is the one who's in control, and he can only do all of these things. Just like he did with all the times in the Bible. He's the one who showed his hand. He's the one who showed, hey, they had their way for a time, but it was their ultimate defeat. And that's what we're seeing right now come to pass.
Bingo. Absolutely. You're exact. I fully agree. And the point I want to talk about birth, right? So the year 50, God's year 50 began on day one, Rosh Hashanah. That's his calendar again. We're going to his calendar. So September 25 was his calendar. 9 months is pregnancy. You add 9 months and boom, you're at June 25. 3 days after the summer solstice, 1 day after Roe v. Wade's overturned. So all of this is pointing to a birth that's about to happen as we step into the end of June. The other calculation that's really comes up rather incredible is from when Corona first became a thing. Okay, it was first Corona was first confirmed case outside of China, so it became a pandemic. This is using, so what do? I use Daniel's timing of calculations. Okay, so 1,260 days forward takes us to the exact same day, June 25. It's mathematical perfection of how this is all playing out. Then we use Daniel's timeline. We got a 45-day window here into summer, and then August, and then that leads us into the birth of a new era, because the whole 3.5 years is finished. And so we're now heading into what you just talked about this morning. The greatest things we can ever possibly imagine. This will be the greatest move of God's Spirit ever in the history of the world. We can't even fathom what this is going to be, but God is in charge. Want a perfect example of how God's in charge? Look what happened. On Purim, that's the exact day that Tucker aired the J6 stuff. You can't make this up.
Wow.
to the exact day. Then it gets even more crazy. How long is Jubilee? 3 years, right? 3.5 years. Julie, for the next, this has never happened before. The next 3 perms, the year 24, 25, and 26, the perms are on blood moons. This has never happened before. Which
God
means
said, "Pay attention to the blood moons, guys. This is biblical. He said, pay attention to the blood when the moon turns blood and the sun turns dark." So that's wow.
So what this I've coined God basically the name that I was supposed to use is called a Haman effect. So what happens, right? What you have sown, that shall you reap. So for the next 3.5 years, all these people of what they've done, starting this fall, starting in August onwards, they're going to have the Haman effect. So it's a double-edged sword. What they have sown, they're going to reap on their own head. So we're literally going to see hangings on national TV. I don't potentially, possibly later this year, more likely maybe next year. But this is going to be truly incredible what's about to happen, but it's based on the Daniel calculations that I just showed you. Now, we talked about God and how he moves on his feasts. So what's important to understand is how, when the beginning of the end begins, right? So when end time started, what happened was the first seal manifest, and that was on Hanukkah. Exactly opposite that, peace was taken from the earth, second seal, on Pentecost, the exact day the George Floyd riots break out. So when's the next? So we just had Purim go by, the J6 stuff with Tucker, but now what's the next big feast? Passover.
Yeah.
What happened at Passover? Well, if we go to the slide, this is crazy, but this is true. The link's right here. The viewers can check the link. It's all there. So the worst day that the evil could have crucified Jesus was on Passover. Like, you have to laugh. They fully fell into the trap, and now Jesus Christ is the Passover lamb. Like, you have to think about this. Of all the days that they could have crucified Jesus, they happened to do it to make him the Passover lamb. Evil fell into God's beautiful, perfectly planned out plan. That's the point of this presentation.
And one thing that he even said this morning is that they fall into every trap that he set, and every trap, because they kept pursuing and doing what they wanted, and that was their ultimate destruction. So basically what you were just talking about, we have to realize now God has timing. We don't know ever the day or the hour, but we do know the season, what we just said earlier. And so we have to be paying attention to what's going on right now and be aware and be alert. God says we're supposed to arise. We're supposed to stand. We're supposed to pray. And what he did say yesterday was we're supposed to hold the line. We're supposed to remember that we're in the army of the Lord. So it doesn't matter what the enemy is doing. We have to be aware of what they're doing, because then we know how to pray against it. God will give us the right words. He'll give us the scriptures, and he'll give us what to do. And so as you see what is going on right now, this is biblical and it's the timing of God. And God is saying, hey, I'm still on the throne. So don't pay attention to give too much attention to what the evil ones are doing, because it's not going to work. It's not going to stay the way it's staying right now.
Well, and what was Exodus, right? Stand, when we were on stage, I think we went to this conference, stand still and watch the salvation of the Lord, for he will work for you today. You see what's happened. Babylon is now worldwide enterprise, right? The world became drunk with Babylon. The money system gone around the world. So basically, this at this point is God's battle. Just like the Red Sea. The Red Sea was God's battle.
Yeah.
Period.
It was.
It was
and
God's
you know what?
battle.
I love how when you said it earlier, because the Lord had brought this up, is that they didn't have a way out. They couldn't see. They just saw the enemy was right there. The enemy was pursuing them. They were caught in a trap, and there was nothing that God's people could do. And then God shows up. Right. We are right here where God is saying, hey, you may be trapped. It may look impossible on every side that you are looking at. It may be looking horrible, but he's saying, look to him, because he's the one who's the author and the finisher of our faith. He said that we overcome the world. He said that he always causes us to triumph. He said that he's a judge over all the earth. He takes down one and builds up another. So what is he going to do? Not only is always unlawful and unjust governments, because they're all over the world. This has not just happened in our country. This has happened worldwide. Yes. And he's saying, just because they did it, they've gotten this far. They went too far. They went too fast. It's not going to happen. He's going to abruptly stop them in their tracks. And that's what we're seeing now. Remember, God also said that President Trump was his David. Now we look to the Savior to save us, but he does use people. And so that's the reason why we have to be aware of these things. God's timing is always perfect, and God is never late. And this half an hour went so fast, Bo.
Yeah. So we can just finish a couple last slides here. So basically, we may expect something crazy to go down here. The angel of death that visited Pharaoh potentially is supposed to be on this earth now. So Diane Larkin even had something about this just past like yesterday. She talked about the angel of death being on the earth right now. What's about to happen is going to be mind-blowing. The third seal of Revelation is the black horse representing the angel of death and the financial scales that are about to flip. So God's going to basically just flip the complete financial system. He's going to rip the money from the evil people We are at 50 years now. This is Jubilee. Abortion is now overturned. So what's about to happen is going to be truly biblical. And now we need to do some calculations, right? So if there were to be a Red Sea miracle moment this year, it took 18 days after Israel was released from Pharaoh to get to the Red Sea. And then they camped there for 8 days, which means that the first week of first week of May could be that Mayday, Mayday moment where literally these people are destroyed. The present day pharaohs are destroyed. The financial system is expected to blow up in May. That's all I can say, because they run the financial system. This is, this is some of your prophetic words that you've had, that these people, treason will be written on them for all eternity. Those that want Julie slides here as well, before she's taken off YouTube, these are all a bunch of prophetic words about a bunch of different people that you spoke of, Julie. So all of it's in there. So your viewers might want to check that out as well too. And lastly, this is the time window. So from Corona, if we take 1,260 days, 3.5 years, that takes us to the end of June, summer solstice. And that embarks us on the next 3.5 years of the most incredible time we've ever seen in this world. That includes not only finances, okay, that literally includes the greatest revival in human history. Okay, we're going to see legs, limbs growing back. I think you've spoken about this.
Yeah.
It's the finance is going to come in so big that at some point you don't care anymore. You're literally going to be just worshiping God. That's all you're going to care about, and that's what is coming. So we're at 50 years since even the revival occurred, and that's going to fulfill also the prophetic word of William Seymour. So we're like so close to things about to happen. This was one of your words that the media will say the eagle has landed. Okay, so I do expect that he returns this year based on my calculations, because if 1,260 days ends this June, that means we start off in a new era. We're going to need, after God destroys something, so the fall of Babylon, you said earlier, a new is built. And the new that's going to be built, you're going to need the builder to come rebuild the financial system, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and one of the things the Lord said, remember, we have a part to play in this as well. This is God. God wants us to know these things that are going on. But he's also saying, hey, I need your trust and faith in me, and only look to me and not to ourselves to try to figure this out. And so God is saying, trust in him. He's got it taken care of.
Right. And then in closing, that heads into fall. And what is fall, right? It's the harvest. Israel was in bondage 400 years. The Mayflower landed 400 years ago. Abortion was 50 years. And now we're at Leviticus, 50 years. Nixon took us off the gold standard, and in 73, same exact thing, we became the petrodollar. So basically the financial system, if God is with us, who can be against us? So all I can say at this point is that, the 400-year cycle is pointing to what happened to Pharaoh and Israel, okay? Or basically the Exodus. And that's why God has spoken through you, and he's given the words, the great Exodus, because this is a worldwide Exodus, not local to.
That's right. It's not just the United States of America.
Egypt at the time. So it's a worldwide exodus. Then couple that with a 50-year Jubilee. God is the Jubilee. We've got, Roe v. Wade now being overturned 50 years ago. The petrodollar is now destroyed. You can now buy Saudi Arabia, the contracts now with Russia. So the whole financial system is about to blow. And when the financial system goes down, the control mechanisms that they used to enslave humanity, when the Federal Reserve note is destroyed, they lose their controls. And so all of it's pointing into this month, something crazy is supposed to happen with relation to the finances and the angel of death. And then that leads us into May. May is going to be that Red Sea miracle moment, potentially the first week of May. And then the end of May, the 28th of May, is Pentecost. So talk about Holy Spirit. We know what happened with Pentecost and the Holy Spirit, right? And that's going to lead into the massive revival that we're going to start to see breaking out all around the world this year. So then that steps us into the end of June, and then August, and then we leap 3.5 years forwards of things of the glory that when Jesus was on the earth, people wanted to touch Jesus, they wanted to hear Jesus, they wanted to be around Jesus, they just wanted to be around the glory. And so how are we going to have stadiums of 50, 100,000 people in stadiums? Because the one stadium that people are going to go, they're going to show up, and they're going to hear video cameras of arms growing back, limbs growing back, right? And so this is just going to go viral. And God is just going to go viral across this whole world, and that steps us into what we talked about before. And what many prophets have talked about is a 1 billion soul harvest, because Jesus Christ is not returned until his name is spoken across the four corners of the earth. So we got a long time ahead of us before Christ is returning yet, and we got some incredible years ahead of us right now.
One of the things in closing too is that we have to remind ourselves that yes, God is in control, and all the stuff that we've been going through. And the bad stuff that may look like it's going to happen here pretty soon, because God said, look at the darkness before dawning. But it is, listen, when you know that the darkness is going to stop and to the point where it's not going to hold you like it was before, when you know that there is an end, then you are willing to fight longer, stronger, and harder, because you know that there is an end. And that's what God is, the whole point. We try to put our reasoning to some of these things, and God's saying, hey, look at me. Stop going by all these different things. This and that, this and that. And that. Well, they said this and they said that. And they said that. Stop and say, you know what, God, what are you saying? Because he is the one who is ultimately, he has the final say. And we are at that point right now. We've gone through so much darkness and so much evil. And God's saying, hey, it's not much longer. Yeah. So hold on now. Even if, say, for instance, by some chance, there isn't anything that happens in the next couple months. What do we do? God says, stand therefore. You can't be moved. Just stand and just know that God said, there are so many things that are prophecies are being fulfilled so fast right now. It is absolutely nuts. It's literally nuts how things are going right now. And God is saying, hey, look, I'm in control. I'm steering the ship and let me do it and let him do it and just trust him, because all God needs is our faith and trust in him.
Well, and let's compare this. Okay, that which has been will be again. Let's compare this. Let's compare the two Exoduses, potentially this new Exodus, the great Exodus. Let's compare it. When Pharaoh came at Israel, he brought everything he had. He brought everything he had. Okay, he brought 600 chariots, swords, all the men. He was going to kill Israel. Okay, so that was the military at the time. So don't be surprised that as we, at the end of April here, potentially, or May, we're going to hear of wars and rumors of wars and a nuclear war. They're going to throw everything they can to scare, because who is Satan, right? He kills, steals, destroys. He's a liar, cheater, and a thief. So don't be surprised if it's going to get really scary, really scary into the end of April, maybe beginning of May, because that would correlate with what happened at the Red Sea.
Yeah.
And then suddenly God shows up.
You're outnumbered, outgunned, out everything.
Yeah.
And then God says, hey, it wasn't about you anyway. Yeah. It was about me. I'm going to put you, listen, he allows certain things to happen to be put in a situation where we can't trust and rely on ourselves, or trust and rely on any other man or any other government. You trust and rely on him. Right. And so again, we have look what's going on right now in Israel. Okay. They are throwing out every stone, every weapon, everything they could possibly do to destroy Israel. We were praying about this morning with my prayer team. We were praying. And one of the things that God showed, they wanted more out of this indictment, not just against Trump. They wanted more for us to do to start a civil war. Okay. Yeah. That's what they want. Yeah. We don't fight like that. How we fight is by standing and fighting in faith and trusting in God, staying on the scriptures, and that's what we do. So no matter what they say, if they're going to start saying war, if they're going to start threatening things, because remember we had a spy balloon go over here for like 5 or 6 days, and they took a lot of intel people aren't talking about because of the whole, Trump and, indictment thing, which was a hoax, and it was ridiculous and stupid, and it's going to fall down anyway. That was a whole plan. They knew it was going to go through. That what they were doing is they want distraction. Okay. That's what they want. And so God is saying, don't be distracted by these things. Pay attention. So please pay attention to what the God is saying, what his word is saying, and not to be moved by, just like what Bo said, if they threaten anything, any type of war, it starts to escalate, because God said things were going to intensify. First and foremost, God always says, don't fear. That's one thing you can walk away from this. Don't fear. Know that he's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Know that he's the God who parted the Red Sea. Know that he's the God who shut the mouths of the lions then. Know that God. He's the one.
Think about this, at the Red Sea, right? That was when God defied the laws of physics. You have the Red Sea miracle. God defied the laws of physics. So God, again, I'm telling you, he is going to defy the laws of physics, and the world will say there is a God, because this does not happen in the world we know. So that's what's about to go down, as whatever their plans are. Julie's got it right. The point is God's in complete control. And back to the beginning of this whole presentation, 2,500 year prophecy. All of it's complete so far, except the fall of Babylon. Daniel 2, verse 34. And we're waiting for the end of a new, for the birth of a new. And that's basically birth pains we are stepping into here.
Yep. So thank you, Bo, for joining today's show. I do have to go, but I do appreciate you being on and giving some of that information to people. And again, if you guys want to check him out, you can go check out his YouTube channel. And I have that link in the description box for you. And I know that he had that shareable link in the beginning, so you can go back and get that link. That was on the screen, that barcode. So God bless each every one of you. Again, thank you so much for all being here today. And yes, hold the line, pray and stand there for walls of Jericho coming down, Red Sea movement. God is going to do a lot of stuff. No eyes ever seen, no ears ever heard. So if you've done that many big things, just think what he's got in store for us. So God bless each and every one of you, and have a wonderful day. Also have a very, very blessed resurrection and Passover weekend and week. And I will see you back on Monday. God bless you.
Okay, so we have some Q&A here that we're going to go through. A couple of good, really good questions. So I'm going to read the first one, and this is from Al. And he says, Dear Penny, I understand you may not answer this email, and I apologize in advance because I do not know how to join the live broadcast that you do. I have emailed you before. I came across you because of this medical nonsense, as before that time, I was asleep to worldly matters. I was interested in spirituality before the medical problems, in fact, for many years. And I was drawn to Dr. David Hawkins and Byron Katie particularly. I was just looking on Byron Katie's website and was very surprised to see that she asked for an update on the thing in the shoulder for her retreat. I was rather dismayed by this. If you are somewhat aware, a teacher of truth and non-duality, why on earth would you ask people for their thing in the arm status? Doesn't becoming aware and awake give you discernment? Even if you are teaching non-duality, meaning beyond being identified as a body-mind, why would you be asking people if they have taken the poisonous transhuman? It now makes me wonder about this spiritual teacher. I was just reading from a book she wrote many years ago called Losing the Moon. And I would like to quote what she wrote. It's quite long, but very much worth discussing. And I think this is the quote. Is it, I love God? Or is it, I love God sometimes when it's giving me the reality I want? War is what is. It's nature. It's what is sometimes. It's not personal. And if someone, God or whatever it is, pulls my baby from me, if that's what it takes, I'm there in that war. Take the baby, tear the baby from me, throw it in the fire. What does it take for me to get this thing? What does it take for me to understand that I am a lover of what is God? My discomfort is my war with God. It's my war with reality the way it is, and not the loss of my body or my baby. There is nothing terrible. There will never be anything terrible. So how could there ever be any evil? I still find the last statement she says hard for me to get my mind around. Nazis did throw babies in the fire. It's challenging to not see that as evil, or what these psychopaths have put into these things in the arm. If we are not identified as a body-mind ego, can these acts happen to some beings who are evolved enough to not be affected by such acts? So to say there could never be any evil, is that living at another level of consciousness? I understand you may not be able to respond. Thanks, Penny. Love, L. So let's go back kind of to the beginning of this. I know I'm familiar with David Hawkins and Byron Katie. And I know that one of Byron Katie's big things is, look, deal with what is. Deal with the reality that is. Stop trying to get away from that. However, let's look at this question that she says, or the statement that she makes. Is it, I love God? Or is it, I love God sometimes when he's giving me the reality I want? Okay, let's take the word God right there. Each one of us is the God. There isn't some God person out there, unless it's your child, your husband, your lover, your neighbor, your boss. They're all versions made in the image of God. In other words, they are images of God. We're made of God's stuff. So it's us. It's what we're doing. It's what we do with the power, the wisdom, the insight, the consciousness that we have. So to put God out there is a big mistake, because it's us. God is us. Okay? So you love God all the time, not just when he's giving you the reality you want, because you're the one giving yourself the reality. You're creating your reality. Okay, so then she goes on, Byron Katie, this is still quoting from her book, war is what is. It's nature. It is nature at the lower levels of consciousness. But that's not that isn't the only thing possible. The reason why you evolve yourself is to get beyond the misery of the first, second, third dimensions, and even some of the war or fighting that goes on at some of the higher levels. You can have evolved, let me say it this way, you can have advanced consciousness without the evolution. They have advanced technology, they have all kinds of skills, they have all kinds of tools, and they use them against one another. So you can only get beyond that by evolving yourself, developing your technology, and using that technology to create a barrier around you, an invisibility shield around yourself, or to prevent people with low-level intentions and low-level consciousness from entering your system. And I have been thrown out of a couple of systems. So, you can't escape unless you actually are able to hold the consciousness. Okay, so war is common in the third dimension. Why? Because people are greedy, or people are afraid they don't have enough. And when you get psychopaths, what is a psychopath? It's somebody with twisted perception, distorted perception. That's it. And they have a need to control others. Some of them take pleasure in watching people suffer. And that's common. So they don't care. They don't care if we're suffering. And to say, God, why are you doing this to us? It's not God, it's those evil guys. So there is evil. Some people are twisted. In order to evolve past that, you have to evolve yourself. You have to get into another dimension of existence. There are other places to go, and they're beautiful. So, where Byron Katie says, this is not personal. You know, if somebody takes my babies away and throws them in the fire, that's personal as far as I'm concerned. That's very personal. And I'm not going to stand by. Okay? Period. That is the humbling effect of being here and being willing to engage at that level. Sometimes that is what you are faced with. Now, if you don't know how to disappear yourself, then you're going to have to deal with it. Okay? So, let's see. If someone pulls my baby from me, take the baby. He's what Byron Katie is saying. Okay, take the baby. I don't care. It doesn't affect me. You know, that's a position that you can take, but it's not very real. And at some point, you're still going to have to process what you did or didn't do. So she says, there's nothing terrible in the world. Yes, there is. At some level, there is terrible stuff. And that's why we hurt. That stuff teaches us to evolve our consciousness in order to move beyond that. And that is the only value of that evil, that pain, that suffering. That's the only value, is that it pushes us to go beyond the old ways, the old thinking. How many times can you get revenge? There's whole cultures, especially in the Middle East, that are based on revenge. And what have they had? 1,000 years of war? It never gets settled. So at some point, and this is something that I have mentioned before, but I'll mention it here. If you're going to evolve to a fourth dimensional consciousness, which is do no harm, that doesn't mean you can't defend yourself. You have weapons and you are watching in case you have to defend yourself. Okay? So when you want to move to a fourth dimensional world, you have to live in the third dimension and demonstrate fourth dimensional consciousness. And that's really tough to do for a lot of people. So you demonstrate that. What does that get you? When you leave here, or when some big thing happens, let's say a war, and let's say you're in Detroit. I came from the other side of the state, originally in the thumb. So let's say a portal opens up. You're not going to be able to move into that portal unless you have a fourth dimensional capacity to hold those frequencies. That's really an important piece. If you are not a fourth dimensional person and you're angry and you're vengeful and you're raging, and some ETs are flying around looking for who can we save, you're not one of them. Not unless you have the capacity to hold the energy. in the face of everything that's happening around you. That doesn't mean be a doormat. That means do what you have to do, stay detached, keep your clarity, know that you are acting as God. God doesn't like that kind of nasty behavior or nasty interaction. But that's where it comes from. It comes from people who are out of touch with the God within. So, so in this quote, it's my war with reality the way it is and not the loss of my baby. Why would I step in to save my baby? Because if I did not, then the people who hurt my baby are going to pay for it down the road. I would not want them to suffer the punishment for having done what they did to my baby. I wouldn't want my baby to suffer either. So I would step in and use whatever power I had. Okay? So, yeah, it is hard to get your mind around the people who say there's no evil. There is evil. There are distorted reality systems. They are called hell worlds. So keep that in mind. So let me just repeat one of the last things you said here. So to say there could never be any evil, is that living at another level of consciousness? You don't say there could never be any evil. What you say is, I will not perpetrate evil. I'm not going to spread it. I'm not going to, be engaged in that kind of thing if I can avoid it. I will righteously defend. That's all you can do. And then you have to, when you're done, you have to examine yourself and forgive yourself for having gotten into such a position in the first place. What were all the warning signs that said somebody was coming to steal your children or to hurt your babies? Why were you ignoring those warning signs? So it's nothing ever happens without a lot, from my point of view, a lot of red flags that say, yoo-hoo, do you see what's coming? Are you prepared? Are you ready for this or for that? That's a very, very important thing. You can't ever say that, well, I didn't see it coming. You could say, I didn't look. So keep in mind that, yes, there is evil. Yes, anybody that is acting as God. Yes, when that's twisted or distorted, that God power, then you say we have a devil or Satan or an evil person or whatever label you want to put on it. But it's not fun. It's not good. And it doesn't result in anything good. So I hope that makes sense, Al. And remember that we are the gods creating the reality that we live within. We are the consciousnesses that are creating. And it is the nature of consciousness to create. We can't help it. So you hear me say all the time, pay attention. Look at what's happening around you. Get ready for what you can't change and change what you can change. Okay?
I have a feeling, that's just a feeling, that there will be a lot of questions about many of the things that you said, but one of them when you said you want to save the baby because you want to save those other person from the karma that they will. Okay. So in that circumstance where somebody knowingly does evil and you're trying to save them from the karma that this evil will cause.
Yep.
So I'm sure people will have questions. Okay. So can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Knowing that people are good and doing the best they can, and okay, they do a mistake and you're trying to save them from perhaps a bad decision they make, that's one thing. But then in that example, that's a little bit extreme. So why would you do that?
Because that's called being in or committed to the great love. Great love means that you will not want anyone to suffer anything for any reason. And so you will prevent them from doing something that would harm them. And you'll take on that responsibility from a place of wisdom, knowing, power, and the ability to forgive yourself. Okay? That ability to forgive yourself is called freeing yourself from karma. Karma is just cause and effect. So you do something bad, you have an effect, you pay for it down the road. Great love, the great love. And this is a lesson that I got directly from Jesus in some of our conversations, was yes, when you have the kind of love that is going to prevent somebody else from doing something that would harm them down the road, then you're in the right place with great love. So I hope that makes sense.
Comes in another question is that I understand in the context of what you're saying, okay, but then we've often spoken that there's no such thing as karma. So because it's a choice that you have when you pass on and you reincarnate, that you decide to try to come back and fix. It's a personal choice. It's not something that's okay. So how does that work?
Okay, well, let's see. Well, so we need to say some more things about karma. Okay, so karma is just you make a decision to do something and it has some results, X, Y, or Z results. So if you don't like the results, then you have the option right then and there of saying, I didn't like that result. I'm really sorry. Let me fix that. Oh, that was stupid on my part. Let me forgive myself. Oh, did I hurt you? Can I make restitution? Let me fix that. So you're fixing the karma immediately. And I'm using karma because it's a well-known term, okay? It doesn't have to be a situation where you do something and, 3 lifetimes later, you're paying for it big time. Unless you're completely unaware of your own power, the need to analyze, how did I get into that situation where I created that? How did I make such a mess of whatever it is I was doing? I will never do that again. I see what led to that. I'm going to take full responsibility. Okay, so when none of that happens, you have a blind spot in the consciousness. You have maybe it's a fear spot. I don't want to take responsibility because I don't want to think I'm a bad person. If you don't want to think you're a bad person, then analyze, how did you make that mistake? How did you create that terrible outcome? How did you hurt that person? What did you need, or was it just a moment of greed, or a moment of stupidity, or a moment of blindness, or a moment of, I don't care, whatever it was, you figure out what that was, what was the driver. And then you don't have the big karmic event 2, 3, 4, or 5 lifetimes down the road because you've already done the work. If you didn't do the work, then you are likely to come back and create the same kind of thing from the opposite point of view, because you need to see both sides. You need to internalize both dynamics, the thing that was driving you and the thing that was driving the person that you hurt. So the important thing is that there really doesn't have to be any karma or punishment, because the only reason you have that karma or punishment is to wake you up to the other side of the scales of justice. You were over here doing this and it hurt this person, and maybe you won and he lost, and next lifetime, you're over here and you're in the opposite position, and now you won, or you lose and the other person wins.
But it still makes it very difficult for people who look, how many people have been abused right now in their lifetime? Most people have somewhere or another. Okay, so all these children that are going through right now, not slavery, but abuse, and like they're going through the borders, right? So we've heard this before. Is that the excuse to say, well, you did something bad in your other life, so you're here now and you have to pay for it? So that comes back always to the same karmic. In Hinduism have that a lot. That you rope what you weep what you sow. No, you reap what you sow. Yeah, you're stuck in a wheel. And so if you see someone suffering, and I've had people tell me that when I was in India, they would see a person who beggar with no legs, no arms, and he's paying for his bad karma. So again, for me, that's
not necessarily.
So that's what I want you to explain. So is it?
Okay, no. So let's look at the planet as a whole. Okay. So in the United States, we had, still kind of do, a very wealthy population. In India, not so much. People much poorer, however, a little more spiritual, etc. And then let's say in Saudi Arabia, we have a kingdom, extraordinary wealth. But if you're a woman in that situation, then you have almost no power, no say. You have to move around almost like a ghost. I mean, that I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you have to wear a veil. If you're a male in that situation, then the training that you get, the teaching is that you can. I'm going to get some feedback for this, I'm sure. But from the bigger point of view, males have all the power in Saudi Arabia, and they control or manage the women, etc. And the women are taught that they can't show their hair, they can't show their body, they can't show anything, because it'll trigger the men to get out of control. and the men get that teaching from the opposite side, and so it's really destructive. However, from the point of view of what am I learning, why would I choose to go into India and be a beggar with no arms and legs, or into Saudi Arabia and be part of the Wahhabi sect of religion, and have to be a ghost of a woman? Why would I choose that? Because there's a value in the consciousness. There may not be any karma associated with that at all, except for the choice you make. I choose this because I want this kind of result. How will that experience change your perception? What will it teach you about other people? How will you expand your view of the world? Those are the reasons why most of that stuff is done. I'm not so sure, and I say this because I'm not so sure, that the religions didn't come up with the idea of, oh, that's a punishment. That's a punishment, and that idea, planting the seeds of punishment, is something that then gets passed along. But the value of, what if you came to the United States before it was the United States, and it was all Indians, and you're a lone cowboy, we'll call it cowboy, making your way across the entire United States, just exploring, meeting all these Indians, dealing with bears and deer and mountain lions and snakes and rivers and all kinds of, weather and what have you. What's to be learned in that kind of experience? When you look at the planet, what I would hope people would see is a planet that offers an immense number of experiences for developing consciousness to move beyond the 3D level. That's what I see when I look at the planet. Not a planet of sinners, not a planet of karma. All of that is, I'm going to say, it's maybe has some usefulness to control people, but that's not why most people engage in hardship. Two people come down, one's going to be the mother and the other one's going to be her baby, and the baby's going to die of crib death, sudden infant death syndrome. And what's the mother going to learn? They chose that. They set that up. That baby agrees, I'll go in for a little while and then I'm leaving. And then you're on your own. And she is, has to work through the guilt, has to work through whatever. What we do with all that is make it a punishment. It's usually stuff that we chose in order to gain wisdom and experience and no holds barred kind of consciousness about how the world is. Period. And we don't give one another credit for the choices. But when you leave here and you've had a really rough time, that's like investing in gold and silver here, or maybe cryptos. That experience is so powerful. It changes you at the core. And that's what people are after. Oh, I got this blind spot, or I got this greedy spot, or I got this stupid spot, or I'm lazy, or whatever. And so you come to a place where you can design and carry out an experience that gets you past the lazy, the greedy, the blind spot, all of that. And that turns into gold in terms of consciousness once you leave.
So let me recap. So you're saying very, very clearly that that karma is not necessarily what we think, because we don't incarnate. If I was abused as a child, it's not because I asked for it, or there's a payback from another lifetime. And so it's not payback, it's not karma. But then you said before, you still said before that if there's a chance that somebody wants to come take my child to make harm, that if I stop that with the great love, I can prevent karma.
Yeah.
So how does that fit in?
Another word.
But still, I'm still thinking this person who knows they're causing harm, because you could say you're causing harm when you make people cry and when you're hurting people, right? That's harm. That's harm in itself. So this person knowingly causes harm, but you want to save them from suffering.
Yep.
Isn't that their lesson? Isn't that why they came here to learn that lesson, so that they could for themselves? So how are you interfering in this, saying, well, this time I'm going to use like great love and stop this person from doing this? So it's a bit,
because great love has its own power right there. Boom. That's a greater lesson than the lesson that they were trying to learn, or that they would have learned. Why would somebody want to hurt anybody if they're distorted, if they're twisted to begin with? They would have the distortion. They would hurt somebody here. When they leave here, then they're looking at themselves going, oh my God, what have I done? How do I fix that? So then they choose to come back and do something that broadens them. We would say that's karma, because you have to work with the language that we have. but the great love experience may transform them, because great love is a field. It's a field effect. And the person involved in trying to do harm would feel that effect. So it's not a small thing, great love.
Okay, so I think 2 years ago, we did like a huge series on spiritual emergency, where you talked a little bit about that, about distortion. So why would someone want to create evil? So why is someone distorted? And you had explained that it has to do with the frequency set, that there is something wrong because we're frequency sets. That's what the soul is. It's a frequency set of experience that we have, and we accrete frequency, kind of. Yeah. And so so people, if they don't have time to go watch a 6-hour video, can you talk a little bit about that? So where does evil actually even come from?
Evil is really anything that destroys love. Okay. And love is life. So you have to realize that love is the energy of life. So there's so many things that can interfere with the frequencies that of a developing embryo that we could almost do eeny, meeny, miny, mo. But let's look at it from this point of view. Why is somebody distorted? That was your original question. They have, their consciousness is the sum total of all of their frequencies, okay? And what those frequencies have been habituated to. Let me say that again. Their consciousness is the sum total of their frequency set, and that frequency set has been habituated in some way. Something may not have turned on, something may not have been triggered, and so the thing that I want to get to is what is the answer on why are some people distorted? Because the frequency set is missing some stuff, or has a whole bunch of extra stuff, or just is unable, if it's usually missing some stuff, it's unable to produce the chemical state that allows the feeling, and the feeling is going to be one of empathy, okay, or sympathy, going to be one of compassion. In other words, remember me talking about people meeting somebody, and what we do is we immediately project into that body, become that individual for a split second, know them because of that becoming them. We know them in that minute, and it may be a lopsided knowing, but it's still a knowing. And then we return to ourselves. So that kind of capacity doesn't happen. The child ends up frozen. So how do we not get distorted people? That is the prime concern for all of the advanced populations that produce children and are so focused on perfect people, perfect raising, perfect development of those children. It's why you can't have children unless you have been through all kinds of training, all kinds of what I'll call substitute teaching, working with children, and then finally maybe you can have a child of your own, but it's never really yours. You're raising a child for the group, and so you're very conscientious, and they pull out all the stops. There is nothing left to chance, nothing, so that you end up with a highly developed, perfect consciousness that is a joy to be with. And I will say this, in some of the systems, that focus on accelerated development, it results in the very, very speedy growth of the entire humanoid body. If you've ever seen a demonstration of an egg, a fertilized egg, and somebody who's a master in terms of accelerating the development of something or someone. And I've seen this a couple times, actually. Put the egg on the table, he puts his hands around the egg and focuses, and I think it's like 15, 20 minutes later, you have a live chicken that breaks through that eggshell and starts running around the table. Normally, it takes 3 weeks to develop a chick. So to go from 3 weeks to 15 or 20 minutes, that's a huge savings of time and effort. In some of the developed colonies, some of the developed groups, races of people, they are able to do that. And by the time your child is 2 or 3 or 4 years old, they're full grown. They may not have all of the experience, but they are wise. They are capable, all of their abilities are in full use. We don't do that. We're still doing human development the hard way, and we're not doing a very good job, unfortunately. So we end up with a majority of distorted individuals, and you hear all kinds of stories from people out there. Oh, this is a prison planet. Everybody dumps their castaways or their penal institution residents here. That's, there may be a few people like that here, but we are the main problem in that we have children willy-nilly and then we don't take care of them. That is not the case. When you have a population living on a big ship, and that population, let's say, is 10,000 people, and that's your entire race, then you put every effort into a replacement. When somebody dies, you replace that individual. That is a whole different way of approach. And they don't end up with distorted people. They don't end up with psychopaths. So, and it's because of the care they take in developing and raising their population.
So my next question would be, you brought up the topic of this evolution of consciousness, moving from where we are right now in 3D and very limited, and being able to move through our karma and move through the great love and be able to help others as well. It's part of moving through fourth dimension and fifth dimension, which everybody's talking about these days, that they want to go to fourth and fifth dimension. So you had done so you had done a very nice analysis of that, describing the difference between the three.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Do you have that? Do you want to talk a little bit about that as a part 2? Do you have that close by?
Yeah, hang on a second.
Mystic, and welcome to today's deep woo-woo episode of Nostradamus and the Vortex of Time. With us today, of course, is Mr. Jay Widener. You can find him at jwidener.com and also here on YouTube at Reality Check. Mr. Widener, Jay, welcome back. How are you?
Hey, good. How are you doing?
Pretty good. We're covered in ice and snow, but pretty good. And of course, please join me in welcoming Julie from MaisonJupiter.com here on the web and also here on YouTube at Maison Jupiter. Julie, is it the wrong slide deck? What's going on? There you go. That's what was happening. Okay. We're having some technical issues, folks. But first of all, welcome, Julie. Welcome back to the show. How are you?
Very good. Hi to the two of you, and hi everybody watching. It's a pleasure to be here, despite this very odd weather crisis here where we are in Canada.
Right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And of course, when you guys see some weird issues like that, please always take the reflex to go to beyondmystic.net/schedule. As you can see here, I did indicate that we have this severe storm, weather notice. In effect, we have an ice storm right now. And as you can see, many power lines are down, trees are down on cars, and yeah, up until just a couple of minutes ago, my own internet service provider, the tower, wasn't up and ready. So it appears that we're running now. We're simulcasting on Julie's channel and on mine. We're going to do our very best to do the show. But let me just backtrack to the beginning here. Yes, this is where you can find Jay at jwidener.com and also here on Reality Check on YouTube. And of course, Julie at MaisonJupiter.com. Okay, now that all of that is out of the way, thank you, folks, for joining us here on this live interactive show. We'll try to do our best here. Julie, set the stage for this particular episode here of Nostradamus and the Vortex of Time. There's a lot happening in our realm. We're getting closer and closer to the storming of the Bastille. We saw earlier in France, people were storming the BlackRock Enterprise headquarters. And of course, here in the United States, we have a very distinct figure that was just arraigned the other day, making a complete mockery of our judicial system. Julie, where the hell are we on this timeline, and how does Nostradamus' prophecies maybe help us here navigate all of this crazy stuff?
Well, great question. And I know Nostradamus was famous for his kind of apocalyptic predictions of like the whole world would go crazy, would have natural disasters, man-made disasters. But personally, I think I'd like to look at more of the Aquarian archetypal energy that's coming in that also Nostradamus prophesied. So I think we're fully into it because Pluto just entered the sign of Aquarius and we're transitioning into the age of Aquarius, as you guys know. So and Aquarius is all about rebellion. It's all about revolution, as you just mentioned, the storming of the Bastille that happened at the very last time that Pluto was in Aquarius. So when we look at the past, we can also kind of know what kind of portal of energy will be revisited with, let's say, another chance for us to make different decisions and to choose our future in a different way. And Nostradamus was really big also on that notion of not having a set future, but just kind of mentioning and looking at different timelines in the future to try to avoid the worst ones and choose a better one. So it's not, as a lot of people are saying, it's not a fate we can't escape. It's more like empowering information to really make conscious decisions. So today we're going to look at 2 quatrains that I think are very relevant at the moment with all this very Aquarian-like energies of revolution, freedom, wanting to step out of the system, the matrix, which is very Aquarian, also technology, ET discoveries. So we're going to look at 2 of those that talk about, let's say, some kind of downloads coming in on Earth and allowing us to rediscover hidden knowledge about ETs, but also about our own Earth.
Okay, very good. Let me bring up the first slide. I see we're a little bit choppy here today, but so far the audio at least is coming through okay. So let us know, folks in the live chat, if there's any issues either with the sound or the audio. We'll try to adjust as we keep going. Julie, so the first quatrain is 714. Set this up for the audience here.
Okay, so he says in the first line, they will come to expose the false topography. And I just want to mention here some versions of this quatrain mention he will, some other versions mention they will, but in the French version, there's no pronouns. So it doesn't really matter. That will happen. That's basically what Nostradamus says here. So they will come to expose the false topography. So that's very interesting to me because he kind of leaves that very mysterious. What kind of topography are we talking about here? So are we going to learn about the Earth topography, geography that is false? So are we going to rediscover Earth geography and the lies that have been tied to Earth geography? So maybe our maps are not accurate and we'll update them. So that's kind of a possibility here. But the other one is also exposing space exploration and the planets of our solar system and probably beyond that have been colonized already and that have been have built on already. So I think there's kind of 2 concepts here of topography that Nostradamus is kind of hinting into. And then second line, he says, the urns of monuments will be opened. So throughout a lot of quatrains, Nostradamus uses the word urns. I noticed not always as a funeral term, but mostly like an Aquarian archetype, because the Aquarian archetype has the urn as a water bearer. So it's a symbol of knowledge and it's a symbol of Aquarius. So to me, it's more like ancient knowledge will be rediscovered because he does talk about monuments. It talks about the past, is hinting about the past in this quatrain, is this line. So hidden knowledge about sacred sites also kind of came to me about monuments. So I think we're going to rediscover a whole lot of information about who we are, where we came from with those sites, and having a lot of knowledge that is going to be available to us all of a sudden. So maybe because of an event, maybe because there's like an influx of energy that opens up our chakras, who knows? So I can't wait to see what Jay's going to be picking up here. And so another possibility here is a secret document found indicating contact with ETs. So I'm writing a lot of possibilities. And then the other thing that kind of hit me when I was reading that line was the Vatican and its secret library. So and I know the Vatican came in the in our energetic field recently with the eclipse coming up that is going to be at a very interesting portal of energy astrologically with the birth of the Vatican. So maybe the secret library is going to be made public, but because Nostradamus seems to be hinting at some kind of event that will make a lot of knowledge available all of a sudden. So then third line, thus multiplies the philosophy of the sacred or false sect. So here exposing the religions that kept us from knowing who we are and where we come from. Also the age of Pisces, which was all about faith, dogma, religion, and then we're moving away from that in our kind of knowledge evolution to Aquarius, which is all about true knowledge, true science, and our interconnection to all human beings and also to stars. So I think we're moving away from those blinders that kept us in the religious system with the age of Pisces, opening up to more knowledge. So I think this lines refer to that. And then last line, black for white and the new for old. Wow. So to me, it feels like we're out of the dark ages and into the age of Aquarius, because Aquarius is also a future-oriented zodiac sign. So kind of entering the sci-fi world.
Okay.
So can't wait to see what you guys have to say about that.
There's a lot in there, and I'm going to ask you, Jay, to maybe break down part by part. I'll bring them each in order for you. But Laurie says, wow, Julie's intro. Can't wait to see where the show goes. Neither can I. That was actually a powerful intro. Jay, let me bring this back up on the line for you as well. For me, let me ask you about this exposing of false topography. There's the idea, and you've mentioned this before on other shows, that the planet we live on might not be exactly as it's being portrayed. And when I see the quatrain, I also think about perhaps national boundaries, this fallacy of having boundaries between all of these countries that at some point here will have to be redesigned. What's your first take here on this false topography, and how does that relate to perhaps the knowledge that is just before us now?
Well, we know 10 years ago in 2013 that Vladimir Putin released all the maps of Tartaria that had been secretly hidden inside the Kremlin. And that started the whole Tartarian alternative history, people going crazy like me, because, you know, there's this country that existed for 1,000 years or so, and nobody ever learns anything about it in their history books. And and then that gives rise to, is there other things that we don't know about? And I've long advocated that there is an unknown country that is here on Earth, that is populated by the elites, and they use it as their taking off place. So when they want to interact with us, then they use their flying saucers and everything, and they come from this undiscovered country, which is kept off all the maps and all the globes and everything. And I believe that it's probably somewhere in the South Pacific. I don't know, though. I would think that that would be the least traveled area on Earth, so that's where I would probably choose. And I think, you know, the very first people, as I said before, that get out into the open sea are going to know where everything is, and so they can redirect everything and everything. So I think that's a lot of what it has to do with. And I also think that the release of the Tartarian documents and maps created an opening for us to now consider that there's a lot of possibilities that we weren't considering before. And that's opening us up to these technologies that are passive technologies that our forefathers in Tartaria were using, that we can now use. And we're now learning how to use these things. There's a great new emerging gardening system called electroculture, for instance, which is where you wrap copper wire around a wood stick and you stick it down into your garden, and it draws down all the energy into your garden. You don't need fertilizer, you don't need a bug to kill the bugs. And, you know, I'm doing it right now in my garden, and I'm really kind of blown away by it. And this again comes from looking at Tartarian architecture, right? So I think that's where we're going.
Hey, Jay, let me ask you, Jay, also, are you using structured water? Some people are using, in combination with that, also the structured water, and apparently the yields are 30, 40, 60% bigger with that water being used as well. Go ahead.
And, you know, you can buy the structured water magnet. I think I spent, what, $30, something like that. And I just clamped it around the pipe that's coming into my main system, right? And now all my water is structured, my shower water, my plant water, everything. So, and this is cheap. I mean, you know, and so I think that that's what we're seeing is the emerging, and the decentralization of the Aquarian age is what's going to, you know, kick this thing forward, because necessity is the mother of invention. So we're going to be out here and we're going to need these things. And, you know, fertilizer shortages, for instance, are now going to become rampant. But if people buy a $40 magnet that magnetizes their water and creates structured water, and you don't need fertilizer anymore, right? So this is where I think we're all heading. I think that's what he's actually talking about. As for the monuments, that's really interesting, because the monument that I studied for 20 years in MAYDAY, France, was built around the time of Nostradamus, we think. And it talks about, you know, the great cycles and the coming changes that are happening. This is 500 years ago, was talking about this, right? And many people have spent, and there's a bunch of these kinds of monuments all over France, by the way, not just in MAYDAY, but all over France, we've been finding them. And a lot of people have speculated that the pedestal of the monument is hollow, and that there could be important documents in there. I don't want anybody to go do anything, please don't wreck anything, but that has been speculated, and we were going to do an x-ray of the monument to see what was inside it. But I think that from what I'm hearing that there has been discoveries in Egypt that are inside these they're not urns, but there's these granite boxes, and they're discovering stuff right now as we speak that is supposedly unbelievable. That's going to change everything. And we have to keep pressure on the people finding it to release that information and not hold it to themselves. And this is not Zawi Hawass or any of the main people in Egypt. This is people like me who go in and are doing their own research. So there is, from what I'm hearing, there is a bunch of really big stuff about to happen.
And do you think, let's backtrack here also, going back to the world map, you said maybe the South Pacific, but do you see the idea of perhaps this ringed planet also? Like we talked about this idea of Atlantis, fabled in a lot of our literature, but this idea of this map here where the planet is even bigger than we are, and we're perhaps in a colony or encircled somehow, and that the rest of the population of this planet doesn't really interact with us other than perhaps, like you say here, either through spaceships or even underground tunnel. Do you have any other data points that suggest here, including the Tartaria maps that Putin just included? Is there anything else in your history field or in your books that suggests that, yeah, there's more here than meet the eye, and perhaps the planet's even bigger or in a different shape than we actually think?
I think that we may live on a hollow planet. I think the Earth may be hollow. I think that there's probably, the problem is if the Earth is hollow and there's an inner sun, right, then it's perpetually warm in there, right? And if there's an opening on the top and an opening on the bottom, which does go with higher dimensional physics, it would make sense that there would be a vortex, right? The Earth would be shaped like a vortex, right? Then you would never, okay, so those openings would be perpetually fog covered. Just like when you open your refrigerator, your freezer on a hot day, you get all that fog coming out. That's because hot air and cold air are meeting, and that turns into fog. And so you would never actually see the openings, I don't think. We would just go over a huge cloud bank. And we do have Admiral Byrd's strange statements that he made flying into Antarctica, where he said he went into a land where it was tropical and he saw these animals and things. And I think there's something to it. That's all I want to say, because people think, oh, hollow planets and hollow Earth. But first off, it makes sense from a higher dimensional physics point of view. Secondly, we know that the Earth expands. That it was once about a quarter of the size that it is now, and it was covered completely in water. All right, and then it expands. Every once in a while, it expands more until you can see the continents that they all fit together, right? And then it expands outward. As it expands outward, it creates a cavity inside, right? And the molten core becomes the smoky god or the inner sun. And the Earth is expanding, and we've gone through many expansions, and we're going through one right now, in fact, and we're going to expect a lot of damage to our infrastructure over the next few years as the Earth begins another expansion movement. So I think that there's a whole other world that exists right here with us that we don't know about, that keeps itself secret from us and influences us heavily, especially our religions. And they come in and they influence Akhenaten, Muhammad, a lot, Moses probably, and they're doing it because they're moving us towards something, And now we're in the age of Aquarius. It looks like they're about to expose themselves to us.
You talked about these big sarcophagi or these big granite boxes in Egypt. We just saw last month the discovery of a brand new tunnel inside the Great Pyramid of Giza. This is on Graham Hancock's channel. I wanted to also ping your memory and your knowledge on perhaps the cavities below the paws of the Sphinx. Now, we've heard a lot of stories about that too. Can you bring that into the context here of these urns being opened, as Nostradamus is talking about? Do you see also that connection with the Sphinx and or here this new tunnel in the pyramids, and what can you share with the audience?
Yeah, the technology has become so advanced that we can now see the cavities underneath the paws of the Sphinx. And I'm sure that, they've somehow worked their way in. As I think I've told you before, when I was at the Sphinx, I found a tunnel in the back, the rear end of the Sphinx, looked right down into the tunnel. So there's tunnels, or there may not even be tunnels. They may be hallways and rooms in structures that have been covered over by sand. That's probably more likely what's going on in Egypt. And that's what Fulcanelli tells us at the front piece of Mystery of the Cathedrals, is that the Sphinx is sitting on top of another structure that's underneath it. So that may be what's going on here. But yeah, there's a lot of really exciting stuff being discovered here recently. And weirdly enough, a lot of it's pointing towards some kind of ET thing, is what I'm hearing. So
okay, that's my next question. Don't go too fast, Jay. Everybody's mind blown already. Okay, so in the Web Data report, starting around, I believe 2007 was the first time Cliff saw this in his reports, and then it was repeated over and over, let's say for the last 14 years or so. There is a data set that at some point here we would have food riots, the degradation of the dollar, the implosion of the religion itself, the Catholic Church itself from within. And that was tied to a data set of the storming of the Vatican. And in there, we would have this big title, which was Secrets Revealed. And so as we go underneath the Vatican, we look at perhaps the history and the books that are from the Library of Alexandria. We look at the perhaps even occupied territories from other races, which brings us to our point. What can you share with the audience at that level as well? And perhaps even having this discussion right now is going to help a lot of people go through that process when and if this actually comes to bear. And we're seeing now more and more of these monuments opening themselves up here energetically to their secrets for the population. So what do you have in terms of the Vatican?
Okay, so the Vatican, about 10 years ago, Pope Francis put out this very odd statement that the transfiguration of Jesus was not solely didn't just happen with Jesus. And everybody freaked out, especially the conservative Catholics. Like, what is he saying? This is the greatest heresy of all time. Well, I got into trying to find out what that was all about. And what has happened is that the Catholic Church has sent priests out over the last 20 years, and they've gone to Tibet and to India, and they found evidence of people attaining light body, solid evidence that people have attained light body many times, including just a couple of years ago. Father Miso went to Tibet, and he was 2 days late to the event, but he did find the nails and the hair that was left behind, and there were 20, 30 people saw the event happen. And so the Pope has come to realize, and the Church has come to realize, that probably I forget his name, Asoka, the Hindu, the guy who converted to Buddhism, sent out many people, to evangelicals out into the world. They went to the Middle East. We know that Jesus studied in India. He probably studied all the light body traditions that were very going at the time. He came back and he did demonstrated it. That's what happened. And so when they went to the tomb on the Sunday after the crucifixion, all they found was the shawl with the shroud that was left behind. And so the church is like completely falling apart now. They're completely, right. There will be no Catholic Church very soon. They now realize that everything that they've been teaching has been wrong, that what Jesus was trying to demonstrate was nothing of what they were trying to teach us. And they're backtracking, and they know that it's over for them. And I don't know what to say, except that, if you really want to read, it's called The Immortality Key. Forget the name, the author's name, but he absolutely proves that the rites of the Mass, of the Catholic Mass, up until about 1,000 years ago, were psychedelic. They were actually handing out psychedelics at the church Mass, and that was what was really going on. And that these particular psychedelics will lead you into understanding how to take your biophotons and increase them to the point where they consume your body and you become light. I know it sounds crazy, but there it is right there. Great book, by the way. If you ever want to interview that guy.
I don't think it's crazy. And Jay, remind me also, in my registry somewhere in my head, I have this documentary or maybe a book that speaks about a temple somewhere in Tibet where you walk in and there's all of these glass urns of all the people who had achieved their light body or rainbow body and who had been cremated, but the cremated remains were all glowing independently with no technology. So there's relation to this book. And if you guys are interested to blow your mind even more, School of the Dead Man, Cliff was just talking about psychedelics yesterday, as if you knew we were going to get into this topic here today. So go check it out. So Jay, remind me about those urns, perhaps with those glowing human remains.
Yeah. So if they have let certain people in where they consume your body and you become light. I know it sounds crazy. And he did demonstrated it. That's of people attaining light body, solid evidence that people have attained light body many times, including just a couple of years ago. Father Miso went to Tibet, and he was 2 days late to the event, but he did find the nails and the hair that was left behind, and there were 20, 30 people saw the event happen. And so the Pope has come to realize, and the Church has come to realize, that probably
the Vatican. And in there, we would have this big title, which was Secrets Revealed. And so as we go underneath the Vatican, we look at perhaps the history and the books that are from the Library of Alexandria. We look at the perhaps even occupied territories from other races, which brings us to our point. What can you share with the audience at that level as well? And perhaps even having this discussion right now is going to help a lot of people go through that process when and if this actually comes to bear. And we're seeing now more and more of these monuments opening themselves up here energetically to their secrets for the population. So what do you have in terms of the Vatican?
Okay, so the Vatican, about 10 years ago, Pope Francis put out this very odd statement that the transfiguration of Jesus was not solely didn't just happen with Jesus. And everybody freaked out, especially the conservative Catholics. Like, what is he saying? This is the greatest heresy of all time. Well, I got into trying to find out what that was all about. And what has happened is that the Catholic Church has sent priests out over the last 20 years, and they've gone to Tibet and to India, and they found evidence of people attaining light body, solid evidence that people have attained light body many times, including just a couple of years ago. Father Miso went to Tibet, and he was 2 days late to the event, but he did find the nails and the hair that was left behind, and there were 20, 30 people saw the event happen. And so the Pope has come to realize, and the Church has come to realize, that probably I forget his name, Asoka, the Hindu, the guy who converted to Buddhism, sent out many people, to evangelicals out into the world. They went to the Middle East. We know that Jesus studied in India. He probably studied all the light body traditions that were very going at the time. He came back and he did demonstrated it. That's what happened. And so when they went to the tomb on the Sunday after the crucifixion, all they found was the shawl with the shroud that was left behind. And so the church is like completely falling apart now. They're completely, right. There will be no Catholic Church very soon. They now realize that everything that they've been teaching has been wrong, that what Jesus was trying to demonstrate was nothing of what they were trying to teach us. And they're backtracking, and they know that it's over for them. And I don't know what to say, except that, if you really want to read, it's called The Immortality Key. Forget the name, the author's name, but he absolutely proves that the rites of the Mass, of the Catholic Mass, up until about 1,000 years ago, were psychedelic. They were actually handing out psychedelics at the church Mass, and that was what was really going on. And that these particular psychedelics will lead you into understanding how to take your biophotons and increase them to the point where they consume your body and you become light. I know it sounds crazy, but there it is right there. Great book, by the way. If you ever want to interview that guy.
I don't think it's crazy. And Jay, remind me also, in my registry somewhere in my head, I have this documentary or maybe a book that speaks about a temple somewhere in Tibet where you walk in and there's all of these glass urns of all the people who had achieved their light body or rainbow body and who had been cremated, but the cremated remains were all glowing independently with no technology. So there's that. There's a relation to this book. And if you guys are interested to blow your mind even more, School of the Dead Man, Cliff was just talking about psychedelics yesterday, as if he knew we were going to get into this topic here today. So go check it out. So Jay, remind me about those urns, perhaps with those glowing human remains.
Yeah. So they have let certain people in, the lamas in Tibet. Now they have to keep it cool now because the Chinese are everywhere now, but they have these rooms where the remains of the light bodies, like you leave behind your teeth and your nails, right? They stay behind and they're glowing, right? And also sometimes they'll just leave a little piece of calcium behind, right? That will be the only thing that's left behind, and then they'll put that into an urn, a see-through urn, and then that will glow. And they actually use it to read and stuff, right? They use these urns to read, and this knowledge has been suppressed for thousands of years, and right now it's escaping. It's escaping in a big-time way. And we know, if you ever watch my video, my reality check, Secrets of Light and Dark, there are ways to fool your pineal gland. Your pineal gland is ruled by light, okay, and dark. Okay, serotonin is released when your light hits your eyes. Melatonin is released when no light hits your eyes. That's why you shouldn't watch TV late at night. You're fooling your pineal gland. And you can do these exercises yourself to completely free. You do need friends to help you, but you can practice these light body practices without drugs, completely with just light and dark, and learning how to fool your pineal gland into excreting these things. We know that melatonin gives you long life. That's what it does. And that's the two things of alchemy: enlightenment and a long life. Melatonin gives you a long life. Serotonin is one atom away from dimethyltryptamine. It's your own endogenous, that means it's within you, your own endogenous DMT. It's you. So when you take your own DMT, it's, the hyperdimensional thing happens, and you're now regurgitating yourself in a way. Mm-hmm. Terence McKenna once said that DMT is like ayahuasca, which has DMT in it, is like giving birth to yourself through your nose, and that's what it's like. And
that sounds like a horror movie, Jay.
that's where we're headed here. And what's really amazing, because I keep track, like you guys do, of all these different things that are happening, and they're all seem to be reaching some kind of culmination right now, in every different place, whether it's Egypt or alchemy or psychedelics, and everybody's like, wait a minute, we're starting to reach conclusions that we couldn't even conceive of 5 years ago. So
Exactly.
it's pretty amazing.
I love what you're saying about also the endogenously produced chemicals. A lot of people are going outside for ayahuasca ceremonies and all that. But when you get into this technology, this light and dark you were talking about, you guys can do that at home. You can set up your own dark room and you can spend some time in there to increase that effect here of this endogenously produced DMT. And when you go, oh man, we could do a whole show on that, Jay, but thank you. I really appreciate that. And I wanted to ask you this last question as you brought up your reality check YouTube, and people, please go subscribe to Jay there. He's got a lot of amazing information. Atop the page on your banner, you're showing an alchemy poster, and I was wondering if in these light bodies and the remains of these light bodies, you know, in alchemy, how you use urine, sperm, blood, crystals, gold, silver to make the philosopher's stone. Have you seen any references anywhere of perhaps also using some of the remains of these light bodies?
No, but it is what alchemy is. What alchemy is the alchemist is seeking to attain his light body, his diamond body, they call it.
Right.
And he's using all sorts of different things that help him achieve, her too, because there's alchemy is usually a man and a woman working together. She's called the Sora Mystica, or the mystical sister, and he's the alchemist, but he needs to have her for the balance of it. And it's weird because over and over, there's one thing that keeps reappearing in this light body stuff is somehow it's related to forgiveness and compassion and love, right? It's like you have to have all these things up front first, like Jesus, like the whole thing of Jesus, right? Yeah. He had to prove that he could forgive his enemies who were killing him, literally, before he could achieve this transfiguration, right? And the same thing with like Pabasambhava and all the others who have achieved it. They had to go through this like whole inner process of I don't know, learning how to walk in other people's shoes, kind of, and alchemy is full of that too. How you you can't have these negative thoughts, and you've got to, or otherwise you'll screw the experiment up, and all of that. But basically, alchemy is about absorbing light, how to turn your biophotons on so that you are emitting as much light as possible.
Fascinating show, Jay. And there's a bunch of people in the chat saying, yes, let's do a whole show on this light technology. So, Jay, maybe we'll ask Julie here to create a special cover for that, and we'll get into some of that research for you guys. And of course, yes, I agree with Lorianne. She says, wow, Julie, as usual, is a majestic mental mountain of knowledge. I appreciate that, Lori. And of course, Julie just brought us into one hell of a rabbit hole with that first slide. But Julie, we have to keep going here. There's more.
And it's crazy because my second slide deals with alchemy. So it's one of the alchemy quatrains of Nostradamus. So can't wait to get there with you guys. I think it's right on the money for today. So yeah, I was looking at the book by Dolores Cannon to get more information about the previous quatrain, and I made a mistake. I just looked at the first line, but okay. So and it's going to let's say lead us into the next subject, which is, I feel, the alien exploration. So let's dive in. So in the book, they say the phrase "he will expose the false topography" means he, and let's remind the audience, if you haven't seen the previous Nostradamus show, that the genius energy, in our opinion, deals with the Aquarian archetype, and not just one person, let's say, as a messiah coming here on earth and changing everything. It's more like an energy that we all have access to. So the genius is kind of this Aquarian archetype. So he will expose a false topography means he, the genius, will show that the way things are looked upon, they will have a false appearance, that the philosophies and science have been built upon mistaken premises, thereby building a mistaken picture of the universe. What he discovers and what he develops will help people come closer to the true appearance of the universe, how it really is in relation to the life force that permeates everything. People will be able to free their inner selves and open themselves up to the higher powers and the higher levels of the universe. So it feels like we're kind of accessing a new portal of energy that will give us access to let's say more people maybe transitioning into their light bodies, more people having this knowledge also on how to do it. And then second paragraph about the same quatrain, he says, but in this case, the false topography is the cover-up. So maybe the other meaning of what Nostradamus really meant by topography. This is the misinformation about the spacecrafts and space stations and all. The misinformation of what the space program told us. They know the truth. I know there is also the false topography of what's happening in the photographing of various planets and stations and vehicles on the moon that were not put there by certain people. So that's kind of mysterious end of the line. So I think it does refer to the Earth, like not knowing exactly, is it hollow? Is the North Pole an opening? Is the Antarctica another opening? But also our knowledge of all that's been built on the moon and other, let's say, planets of our solar system. So if you go in the second slide, JC, or if you guys don't have any comment, we can switch to the second one. Oh, JC, you're muted.
Yeah, my audio is choppy on my end. I can barely see you guys. You're not moving, but everybody in the screen are saying that they're saying you. Okay, so it has to be at my end. Yeah, let me let you go to the second slide right away. It'll give me time. I'll try to get off the screen here and maybe reboot my router, and I'll come back and we'll try to keep the show going. Okay, keep going. Julie, I'll bring up my slide, but you might lose it here if I reconnect. So let me just put that on the screen.
Okay, I'll bring mine. Don't worry.
If not, you have it on yours as backup as well. Okay, so let me bring up the second one. This one here, Julie?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'll be back in a sec. Go ahead.
Okay, so there's another, okay, so I'm just gonna bring mine on the screen. Here we go. So there's another book that I own that was given to me by my sister. So this is Nostradamus, The Complete Prophecy. So it's like a whole brick of all the prophecies. Yeah. Honestly, the interpretation in it are so-so. They're not my favorite, but I do like to look at the different translation of the quatrains and sometimes the explanations of them. So this one is by John Hogg. And to him, the quatrain that we just looked at, exposing the false topography and all the documents being revealed, to him, it relates to the French Revolution. So honestly, that was quite surprising to me. But he does make the link also that the quatrain is number 7Q14, and the storming of the Bastille happened on the 14th of July, so on the 7th month of 1789, which is a very important date in astrology as well, because it's the last time that Pluto was in Aquarius. Yeah. So do you understand why they would link it with the French Revolution, this quatrain, Jay? Do you have an idea?
I don't. I know John, and I agree with you. I don't normally care for his interpretations that much of Nostradamus, but I'd have to. Can we look at it again, maybe? Maybe I can see what he's talking about.
Yeah, let me bring this up. Here we go. So yeah, they will come to expose the false topography. The urns of monuments will be opened. Thus multiplies the philosophy of the sacred or false sect, black for white and the new for old.
I can see where the multiplies the philosophy of the false sect could be the French Revolution. That does.
Yeah, me too. The last time
monuments, I don't know about that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is interesting that he's pointing towards the last time that Pluto was in Aquarius.
Yeah, exactly. So I think he's kind of maybe hinting at an end of an era, of a way to think, a way to understand philosophy. And yeah, it's so interesting because we're also Pluto just moved into Aquarius, so it's kind of pushing this Aquarian archetype even more. And so we're kind of having this rediscovery of hidden documents, which is also Pluto. Pluto reveals stuff that was previously hidden. And Aquarius is all about technology. It's all about things that kept us from attaining freedom. So the knowing of our rights and knowing of the technology I just said. Also, it deals with astrology, interestingly enough. And it deals with AI and our connection to ETs and to the stars. So very interesting. And I just made the parallel here in the second part of the slide that 14 in tarot numerology, because we all know that Nostradamus was very adept of both tarot and astrology. So he did number himself his quatrains, and it's kind of very mysterious what it correlates with, all the numbers. But he did say in the Dolores Cannon book, that was channeled, of course, that it had a meaning, but he didn't say what the meaning was to say. So he said, oh, you have to look further and find it yourselves. But I know 14 in tarot numerology deals with the Temperance card. And to me, that's another Aquarian archetype, because you see he's dealing with vases that can be urns, water, which is kind of the symbol for knowledge, and communication about that knowledge. Thank you, JC. And so communication, balance, and knowledge. And there's also an angel and an urn. So very much Aquarian. And this number of the quatrain 714, if we add the numbers together, it's the world card. So kind of the end of an era and a big change on how we experience the world. So all of what you just said previously about us kind of doing things that look supernatural, attaining light bodies, makes total sense, because kind of the physics of the world are changing, because we're also changing era with Pluto in Aquarius. So
that's right. That's exactly right. 14 is also the number of part pieces that Set cut Osiris up into. So
Oh, wow.
and then he spread every piece all over the planet, and Isis had to go around and pick them all back up. And she only got 13. She was missing the phallus, so she had to create a golden phallus, to which she impregnated herself with, and had Horus, who went back and got revenge. And so it's the whole alchemical story of dismemberment, regrouping, resurrection, right, and then rebirth. So 14 is
Wow.
that also.
JC, you're muted.
Okay, I think I'm back. Going back to these monuments from earlier, do you think the phallus is maybe here at St. Peter's Square? Is it maybe in Washington, D.C.?
It's probably, I don't know where it's at, but it's it's probably been one of those places. Or the three main places are what? London, the Vatican, and D.C. So that's where they keep all the stuff. It's probably in D.C., like the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, in that warehouse there somewhere.
Right.
So
wow.
Yeah.
Going back to, I missed part of it there as I had to reboot. I wanted to get back into the ET component. Julie, you brought up the fact that, of course, Pluto was entering Aquarius. In this particular episode, Pluto the Destroyer, if you guys haven't seen it, go check it out on our Rumble feed. We talked about, going back to the quatrain here, the removal of the sect or the removal of the cults. We talked about some of the figures in the ET community and their masks haven't been dropped here as of late, so that we can actually enter into real disclosure and a rapprochement between us and our actual star families. Jay, I know this is a difficult subject, if not an impossible subject for you to speak online. Can you share anything about what's going on right now, even not necessarily about the particular gentleman on the screen, but this idea of having to remove all of those false gurus, those cults around the ET conversation, and where you see things moving forward here as we are definitely coming closer here to this bigger conversation about extraterrestrials?
Well, everything's moving to cults. Everything now. Politics, art, movies, everything is cults now. And it's very disconcerting because cults don't really learn to think for themselves. They usually follow a charismatic leader. But at the same time, it seems like the mask is coming off of everybody, and they can't really run and hide. And people have had a very jarring learning experience where they believed what people were telling them, and then that person then ends up saying that no, everything I just said wasn't true, and so they get all crushed and hurt. And they free energy was promised in 2015, and zero-G vehicles were promised, and it was all going to happen real soon, and then none of it happened. And here we are years later, and none of it happened. And so what it did is it demoralized the community, and so it was a very bad thing. And so, but the community learned, and so now the community is going to demand to see the receipts from now on, I think. And so it was a bad experience, but it was a good experience. But here's the thing: if we can get the secret of alchemy out into the world, so that everybody can practice alchemy, light body practice, then we've won. Then we've undermined the entire structure of the world. The whole structure will be undermined. You don't need food when you're a light body. You don't need to sleep. You don't need, right? And you don't have to, and it can be a slow process. So this is why it's so suppressed, and why the church taught it all wrong, because it has to be suppressed, because it's the one thing that will overturn the power structure. And so they can't let it happen. And I don't care anymore. And I think there's a whole bunch of people that don't care anymore. And so we're just saying it out loud. And I even think the Pope is, I think he's been shut up after he made the statement, but it'd be interesting to see what he has to say about all this.
And that's why in our last episode, Julie and I, with Penny Kelly, we were talking about creating this new course on the academy about sex, not sex per se, but Kundalini, the technologies behind sex, and why all of that was obfuscated from our collective field of view, and why the religions are working very hard in tandem with the distortion of sex, again, so that we don't get into the Kundalini, the Chi, the Prana, the mechanisms into that light body scenario.
It's interesting. I have a book I found it in Europe years ago. And it's a medieval book on sex, a European medieval book on sex, and it's teaching Tantra. Yep.
Oh, wow.
It's teaching Tantra. I was like, what? This can't be. And so they knew about it. That's what I'm trying to say, is that that all the stuff that we think we are all discovering here in the last 40 years or whatever, it's been around forever. I mean, all of this stuff has been around forever. So we're just rediscovering it.
Right. Wow. Thank you, Jay. Appreciate that. Julie, we're 46 minutes in. What I'm hearing from you guys is very choppy. So I know it's probably on my end still we're having the issue. From your perspective, everything sounds good, Julie?
Yep.
Okay.
All good.
Let's keep going then. I'll bring up the next slide here.
Yes.
Julie, you wanted to bring into context, of course, today
Yeah.
the representation of what we kind of touched on the Pluto the Destroyer episode on Rumble, this idea that we're in those same axis now in the same alignment as we saw in 1789, which of course led to the storming of the Bastille. We just got Mr. T arraigned the other day, and we're having crazy bank runs as we speak. And if you guys have been following Cliff Hyde in the last couple of days also, he's been telling people to buy silver and to buy it now. And this is the video you're looking for, heavy metal. You'll get some more context now. And he was saying that perhaps within the next 2 weeks, even the silver in the pipeline coming in for delivery is also evaporating. So there's big happenings right now in the silver market. As we know, it passed the $24 mark at closing last Friday, which was a huge line in the sand. And of course, on Mr. T's arraignment day, we passed $25 per ounce. So there's a lot happening there. Julie, set this up for the audience members. The 1789 correlations to what's happening today, and see what Nostradamus had to say about it.
Yeah, so the correlation between the French Revolution and the previous quatrain, to me, I wouldn't have made a link between those, but I found it very interesting because that was the last time Pluto was in Aquarius, and also the last time that the nodes were in the financial axis, 1789. So right now, the nodes are in the same place. So the North Node is in Taurus, South Node is in Scorpio. So we're letting go of all the power structures that's been enslaving us financially. And that was kind of the same karmic topic that was happening back then in 1789. So just before the storming of the Bastille on July 14, 1789, there was also a major economic crisis at the time of Louis XVI. So a big financial shift was sort of happening, and that led to a powerful revolution. And of course, it ended up as being the end of monarchy. France became a republic. So you see this very emphasized Aquarian archetype of liberation, equality, and that was also part of the motto for the French Republic: equality, brotherhood. I can't remember exactly what it was, but very much Aquarian, that we're all equal under the law also. And that also came with the same year, the Declaration of the Rights of Men from the Assemblée Nationale in France. So in France, I mean. So basically that gave more legal rights to ordinary people, equality before the law. And it was kind of the foundational document for democracy in Europe. So you kind of see also this Aquarian archetype of wanting to be equal, not wanting to have a middleman between you and your fellow citizen and your resources, you and your knowledge, you and, you get the drift. So, and that also led to the creation of the middle class, which I think is one of the most important things to mention here, because before that, it was very polarized between the rich people, the aristocrats, the royalty, and then you had the bottom of the pyramid, the poor people. So there was no middle class before the revolution. And last time Pluto was in Aquarius, it created a middle class. So I found it, and we touched on it on the Pluto in a Pluto the Destroyer episode, that also I feel like that was why since 2020 they attacked the middle class more than any other let's say level of society, because it was the one that could start a revolution and bring the power down. So, and they knew also that Pluto, once it entered Aquarius, would change the whole power structure. So they would disempower the middle class before it could happen. And the kind of the wind was in our sails. So very interesting. JC, you're still muted.
Julie, just to bring another point there too, I want to have Jay on this. Set up the video you did, or the questions that were set up here from some of our tarot readers with respect to how Quebec was attacked during the pandemic, and also France, and how perhaps they were attacked even more than some other jurisdictions around the world. What's the correlation between that, 1789, Pluto, and perhaps the role of the Khazars? Set that up in a question for Jay.
Yeah, very interesting link. Merci, JC. So basically, we had our staff retreat recently that was in the north of Quebec. So we gathered all of the Beyond Mystic Maison Jupiter family together. And so a lot of the French culture came in our field of energy, the French language, of course. And then we were talking to realize that like the measures since 2020 were the worst in France and in the French part of Canada, which is Quebec. So, and then I was like, how is it interesting? And I know, of course, there's been other parts of the world that's been severely hit by those measures, but why would they hit the French people more than everybody else? So that I kind of hinted that to Janine, and she did a whole card pull on her Beyond Ravens on Rumble. And she got that because the people were more financially independent. So a lot of small businesses were owned by French francophones, so French speaking people, but also they were more independent thinkers. So they were very consciously targeted by those measures to try to bring them down, because they knew they were the one that could rebel the most for the one world government type of project. And also it came into, like, I received a lot of emails from people after that from Quebec, and they were kind of alluding also to the Qatars tradition that were in France. So I think there is a whole link of DNA, maybe, I don't know, bloodlines having to do with Qatar. So I'd like to hear you, Jay, what you think on that topic.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head there. The French absolutely refuse to go along with anybody, and they're notorious for it. You try to tell the French that they have to put certain additives in their food, and they'll just start screaming and yelling at you. And there's something about the whole culture that is a threat, and it's always been that way. And that's why England's constantly invading France. And the Cathars, of course, were a very Gnostic group of people who had women as their priests, and they had sacred healing rites, and they refused to become Catholics. And of course, the Catholic Church destroyed them in the Inquisition, to which the Pope was asked, "How can we tell the Cathars from the Catholics?" And the Pope said, "Kill them all. God will figure it out." And so they came and they killed everybody in the south of France. So I wrote a whole screenplay about this, and I actually had Leonardo DiCaprio interested in it at one point. This was about 20 years ago, and but I couldn't get financing. But the whole story is amazing. And there's another point that needs to be said about this, and because the Cathars and the French Revolution have something in common, and with also today with what's going on, and that is that the French Revolution did not succeed until the women got involved. They were not involved. And then when the food prices started going up and they couldn't feed their kids, they started getting really pissed off. That's when the revolution started. The same thing with the Cathars. The Cathars were ruled by women. There was a whole class of women that ruled them, and that really irritated the church and England. And today, what really scares the powers that be, I think, is the fact that women are rising up. They're going to school board meetings, and they're starting to make their voices heard. And I don't think they know how to handle this. What are you going to do? Go beat up the woman? I mean, what are we going to do about this? And it becomes like a very upsetting point for the people in power to have all these women complaining and yelling at them and saying, "You can't do this," and "How dare you teach my kids this," and all of that. And it's having an effect. And I believe that if we have a revolution, I don't think we're going to have a violent revolution, but I think it's going to be led by women. It's going to be a cultural revolution that will be led by women, and the men will follow, because right now we can't say much as men anymore. So it's going to have to be women, because we just get called names and told that we're just what is it, manscaping or whatever they call it. You really can't do anything. Men have to let women do it now. You just can't do it.
Yeah. And I have to say, like, it's very Aquarian again, because Aquarius to me is all about balance between your inner divine feminine and inner masculine. So it's not about women overpowering men, which is kind of what the mainstream wants you to believe, that, oh yeah, I'm an empowered woman, meaning like I'm trying to be a man. So that's not at all what it's supposed to be. Aquarius, in my mind, is to be a balanced individual.
I just keep losing connection. So I left. You guys were talking about the banking system, and I came back. You're talking about manscaping. So I'm not sure what that's fascinating.
Yeah, we went a long way, JC.
I heard you say DiCaprio. I think Jay was saying that he had a script for him. What was interesting in the news today too, he's out there fighting, of course, unveiling some truth bombs there about the Obama campaign and some of the campaign finances and maybe laundering stuff. So I thought that was funny. What's your view on this character, DiCaprio, at this point? Where is he on the spectrum here, fighting the spiritual war? Do you know?
I don't know. I know that he's very interested in the Templars and the Cathars and all of that. And I think his heart's in the right place. I think he's been a little, the problem with being a white guy in Hollywood these days is you have to act really well or you're not going to get any jobs. So it's hard to tell when a white guy's acting woke if it's real or not. Like the guy that played Captain America, he's super woke, right? And he's super white guy, right? And it's like, I don't believe him. I don't believe it. I believe that he probably has to do this kind of thing. So I can't really tell. I know that Leonardo is 53 years old, and he's dating a 19-year-old, and I think he's pissed off a lot of feminists and stuff with that one. But hey, whatever, you know.
I thought his cutoff age was 18, so at least he's broadening the spectrum there a little bit. Okay, I think this is what you guys were referring to with the manscaping and all the crazy transgender stuff, all these brands losing their shit here. Of course, Travis Tritt is seconding the video that Kid Rock did the other day, of course, admonishing here Anheuser-Busch and the Bud Light series. Also, Nike now is in trouble for all this. Absolutely crazy. Julie, we have quite a few more slides, man. I keep losing connection. I'm having trouble following with you guys. What do you think?
Whoop. Goodbye.
Okay, let's do another one, Jay, if you agree,
Okay.
and then we can get on the alchemistic quatrain that I really wanted to have your input on, because I think it's going to be a great addition to this one. Okay, he's back. Maybe for our ending.
You guys want to call the show because I can't do this anymore.
Yes, let's do another one to talk about alchemy more.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and thank you for all the comments and supporting us here, even though we're having all of these weird technical issues here with this ice storm that both Julie and I are being affected by here from the bandwidth and also from the internet and power outages as well. Thank you so much for joining us here today, guys. Please, in the meantime, go and support our friend here, Jay Weidner. You can find him at jayweidner.com. If that works. I don't know. It's like coming up on the screen. Nope. Of course, on his YouTube channel as well as Reality Check. And you can find Julie.
Oh, here we go. So we can find JC
at Reality Check.
Yeah, hopefully soon. And then thank you so much, Jay. That was amazing. You always bring such amazing content, and I can't wait to talk to you again. Okay. Thank you, everybody, and see you very soon. Au revoir.
Bye.
Building your online business? Go to Wix.com and set up your store on a single integrated platform. Add products, showcase them dynamically, and seamlessly track your inventory. Accept multiple secure payments, and design your storefront down to the very last detail. Get all the tools you need. Drive more sales with customizable gift cards and flexible product subscriptions. Retain customers with a point-based loyalty program, email automations, and reach millions with sales channel integrations. Complete your setup with a personalized analytics dashboard. Make smart business decisions and shape the next phase of your business. Build, manage, and grow from one place. Go to Wix and launch your online business today.
Subcommittee will come to order without objection. The chair is authorized to declare recess at any time. Would ask the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Bishop, to lead the committee and those present for the hearing and Pledge of Allegiance.
Mystic, and welcome to today's Deep Woo Woo